hey, hey, ho, ho, welcome to the show. Hey, 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 ho, ho, welcome. All right.
Welcome, everyone, to the definitive Good Mythical Morning Iceberg Fully Explained. Thank you to all the folks who helped me make this iceberg and for watching the previous parts. If you've seen the previous parts, feel free to skip this intro, but do know that each tier has been given some love and that there have been numerous entries that have been re-recorded, so if you have seen the previous parts, there'll be something new for you here. Now for the folks who haven't seen the previous entries, welcome once again. You probably know how icebergs work, but this one I want to structure a little bit differently. Basically, the first tiers are going to provide baseline information that you're going to need for the later tiers, where those concepts are expanded upon. To give you an example of what I mean, you may know about the numerous controversies that occur in the International Taste Test episodes. Well, before we can talk about the controversies, we need to first introduce Chase, the International Taste Test format, and Link's history with Sharp Things, and then, after all that background has been discussed, we'll then go into the controversies. Now this iceberg was created with the help of the Good Mythical Morning subreddit and icebergcharts.com, who helped me with the formatting and providing a template that I could use to create this iceberg in a decent sort of way. Now the image for this iceberg is D's Dimensions by D, of course, which is basically a template that I found on icebergcharts.com. This is not necessarily the aesthetic that I want to go for, but it's one of the few images that worked with 6 tiers, so don't blame me for like the weird eldritch horrors that are going to be on screen for the iceberg. Just know that that's not necessarily my choice. But anyway, enough with the introduction. Just relax, do some housework, eat your Texas Roadhouse takeout, whatever you're going to do, and we're going to begin with Tier 1, Discovery. So this first tier is just going to cover the very, very basic stuff about Good Mythical Morning. Everything you need to know if you literally don't know anything about this show. That's how these iceberg videos work. Is that, I want to start with the very basic stuff. So, Rhett McLaughlin and Link Neal. This is going to be our first lore entry on the iceberg and the most basic thing you need to know about Good Mythical Morning. These two have been lifelong friends and have been doing internet stuff since the beginning. I'm going to try not to go into too much detail about them since this is not going to be a Rhett and Link iceberg, but there'll be some tidbits along the way, such as Rhett is tall. The most basic thing to know about the Rhett and Link duo is that Rhett is particularly tall. So tall, in fact, that it tends to cause him various medical issues, the foremost being back problems. But besides that, the main thing you need to know at this point is that Rhett is the patented tall guy of the group. Rhett and Link are musicians. Another very basic fact, both Rhett and Link cut their teeth on the internet in the music scene. Their main channel, Rhett and Link, just hosts a bunch of music stuff that they made, which we aren't going to really cover, but this also explains the kind of like musical guitar-y theme on Good Mythical Morning, and they play a lot of music on the show, so. Rhett and Link are married. The final basic fact to know about Rhett and Link is that they are married to their wives. That's right, whom they mention them time to time on the show. They are married. Food videos. Most folks who know about GMM know about it from its food videos. They kind of just assume they just make food videos. It didn't always used to be this way, but that's the thing people know GMM for, especially for the Willets. The Willets are the most iconic series on the show by far. This is where Rhett and Link eat a variety of foods with a peculiar spin on them. This started with Willet Taco, but it's a series running even to this day. These can be anything from basic things like eating cheesy broccoli on tacos, and can go into more nutty things like stuffing a Long John with Rhett and Link Value Select shaving cream. This kind of goes into the next entry, which is Rhett and Link just eat gross things. This is the first community entry on the iceberg. These community entries basically mean that they're just ideas that the community and the zeitgeist of humans have on the show. And this is the most basic thing that people will say about the show if they aren't particularly huge fans. They basically just see thumbnails that say, will it pig anus or something? And then just assume that Good Mythical Morning exists for Rhett and Link to eat a bunch of messed up weird food. Someone who's a big fan of the show probably doesn't think that this is what it is, but the main thing that the normies will think about the show is that it's just Rhett and Link eating gross things. So let's talk about that. Good Mythical Morning's iconic catchphrase. They say it at the beginning of basically every single episode, even though at one point they cut it off for a little bit, but we'll get into that much deeper in the iceberg. For now, just assume that this is the thing they say at the beginning of every single Good Mythical Morning episode. At one point they had fans say the iconic intro, but that was changed to the fans saying the intro to the Wheel of Mythicality. This is a staple of Good Mythical Morning since the very beginning. Basically, you spin the wheel, and at the end of the episode, do whatever the wheel tells you to do. Before each spin, the introductory phrase, "It's time to spin the Wheel of Mythicality," is spoken, which precedes the phrase, "You know what time it is," typically said by Rhett, Link, or a guest they have on the show. Speaking of guest appearances. Many times it is not just our Rhett and Link fellas, sometimes a guest is sprinkled in for goofs and giggles. Sometimes the guest is well received and sometimes they aren't, but all that matters is that they are there. And there are a lot of guest episodes of Good Mythical Morning. Mythical crew and staff. No man is an island, and the same goes for our favorite morning show. Starting off, they only had one person, Jason, who was the one who manned the camera and whatnot, but now the whole Mythical company has over 100 employees, many of whom work specifically on Good Mythical Morning. There also was a sort of sub-fandom that started to crop up in the later years about specifically the Mythical crew, and not just Rhett and Link themselves, but we'll get to that when we come to it. Games. Rhett and Link particularly enjoy making game videos as well. These game videos mostly involve food, but can sometimes be like a trivia thing. Generally it'll be a competing thing, and whoever loses has something bad happen, and whoever wins has something good happen, but it's never like the person who loses gets something and the person who wins gets something at the same time. It's always just a, one and done kind of thing. And if they tie, it's generally that they both fail and they both get the bad thing, which kind of, sucks, but it makes sense logistically. So yeah, they play a lot of games on the show. If you don't know them for their food, you probably know them for their games, but I would think you'd know them for their food a little more. Good Mythical Morning is running out of ideas. This is our first theory on the iceberg, one that can be easy to ascertain as the prominence of over 1,000 episodes of Good Mythical Morning have released since 2012. And Rhett and Link have basically been making an episode every single day with only a 2 to 3 month break every year and a break on the weekends back in the day. They've really got to run out of ideas eventually, but thankfully with the advent of series and episode topics based off of years, cultures, and history, they'll probably have ideas up until they've gone through every single decade of history, every single culture in existence, and every single sport idea that's around today. So it's fair to say Rhett and Link will probably be long dead before that happens. Rhett and Link met in the first grade. Another well-known piece of Rhett and Link lore, basically their entire YouTube persona is them having met in first grade and have been friends ever since. The story is that they were told to stay inside after lunch for writing profanity on their desks and had to color things in their coloring book. Now, on interviews and stuff, they say they were coloring mythical beasts, which is where the whole mythical aesthetic came from. But in an episode of Ear Biscuits, it's confirmed that the mythical beast thing probably wasn't 100% true, though they were coloring and did meet in first grade, according to them. The Rhett and Link community. This describes basically you and me. Well, I mean, I don't know you, but given the fact I've already made a video on Good Mythical Morning, it's fair to say I would be a part of this community, or this thing. So, in short, yeah, it's the community of Rhett and Link, which is why it's like Rhett and Link community with the K spelling out the community. Over the years, they've been given a lot less prominence in the specific videos, but they've migrated from their original 2005 looking website to all reaches of the internet and social media. Whether the page goes by that name or not, they are still a part of the Rhett and Link community. And it's pronounced Rhett and Link community without a space after Link. So, just so you know. Mythical Beasts. This is the name that's been given to fans of Good Mythical Morning, with the name actually coming from the community itself, which Rhett and Link tasked itself with naming. This is coming between Randlers and Mythical Beasts, Rhett and Link thought that the mythical beasts were a better name because it focused less on themselves and more on the community itself, but the Randler was not forgotten because... Randler. The Randler, which is a weird squirrel-looking thing with wings and antlers, is a mascot of the community and the mythical beasts. You'll see this on merch, hidden in the intro, and referenced throughout the GMM set. Now you may be wondering how Randlers was focused on Rhett and Link. Well, the reason it's called a Randler is because it's like Rhett, so R and L-er, which is like Rhett and Link-ers. So Randler still comes up from time to time, and it was not forgotten. Belvedere the Cockatrice. The final main mythical beasts of the cast, this guy makes an appearance in every single Good Mythical Morning intro. It's basically a fire-breathing rooster with wings and the tail of a dragon. And unlike the Dragon's Dogma Cockatrice, which just petrifies you and, kills you, it brings good luck and rouses the mythical beasts to, quote, promise prosperity in a new episode of Good Mythical Morning. Tier 2, Examination. So this tier goes a little more in depth into Good Mythical Morning. This will be the tier that most casual fans will know about. And yeah, if you are a fan of Good Mythical Morning, you'll probably know most of these. So start paying attention now, I guess. Actually pay attention before, but... Ear Biscuits. Starting off on Tier 2, we have the Rhett and Link Side podcast channel where they discuss things at length. This started off as a place to interview guests, but became more of a venting grounds for Rhett and Link as they began to become more candid with their audience about themselves. Nowadays, it's kind of a continuation of the older episodes, where they would just talk about themselves and whatnot. Rhett and Link Stories. This is an absolute classic. Some of my favorite episodes were from these early seasons where they would just talk about previous happenings in their lives. They obviously had to stop doing this eventually, at least on the main show, just because they would eventually run out of things to talk about and want to actually do things. Like I said, if you want more Rhett and Link personal stories and thoughts, just listen to that Ear Biscuits podcast. Good Mythical More. This is a segment that's been running since Season 4, basically just an additional less structured and more relaxed segment that happens after the main episode. In recent times, they've started to feature the crew more and have started to have their own little segments running, but the charm of Good Mythical More was always its relaxed and easygoing nature. Stevie. Stevie's a longtime crew member turned creative officer of Good Mythical Morning. You're going to hear her voice in many episodes that she was a part of, and she was on the show since 2013. She has only gained more prominence as the show has continued, but she also runs a show called Let's Talk About That. Not to be confused with the opening intro catchphrase thing, this was basically a weekend show about Good Mythical Morning that tended to focus on behind the scenes goings-ons and extra segments. This ran for about a season on the Good Mythical Morning main channel throughout season 15, but it was then brought back after fan interest was renewed, though it only ran on a platform we won't mention until the next layer. Chase. Chase is another longtime crew member who's been part of the show since 2014, so just a little bit less time than Stevie. He started with designing props and sets and whatnot in the beginning, but quickly rose through the ranks to become a producer, then a senior producer, then a supervising producer, then a senior supervising producer. He makes many appearances on the show as the guy that's basically forced into all the silly costumes, but he also used to make all the foods for the Willets before another crew member came along. And a fun fact, his grandma was also a wrestler, and is currently not alive, so rest in peace Latin Hellcat. Josh. The mythical chef of Good Mythical Morning, basically deemed the executive producer of culinary content these days, but he started off in 2017 being the guy who made all the foods for the Willets and other food-based programs, once that became more of a staple of the channel. Since Chase was a props guy, I guess they used to think of food as props, which is kind of weird. But anyway, Josh has become a mainstay on the channel and even has a show of his own. Mythical Kitchen. This is a Good Mythical Morning side channel focusing on the food side of Good Mythical Morning. The channel originally used to be a behind-the-scenes mythical crew-oriented channel called This Is Mythical, but after food really became the main avenue they wanted the show to focus on, they changed gears for it and completely rebranded the channel, unlisting all previous content that was hosted on there. The channel now features various food-based segments, including making celebrities' last meals and making expensive versions of fast food. It's a pretty interesting and known channel if you peruse Good Mythical Morning, but its impact on the show pretty much ends there. International Taste Test. This is a more recent staple of the show. This has Rhett and Link tasting food from other countries and trying to guess where they originated. The gimmick, however, is the fellas have to throw darts at a large map and hit the country they believe the food is from. The distance from the dart to the correct answer is then measured by our favorite senior supervising producer Chase, and whoever has the lowest score wins, so it's like golf rules. Food Feuds. A standard head-to-head between two food places, which tests various comparable products and ranks them each on a score of 1 to 10, with Rhett and Link being able to give different scores, so it's different than the Willets, where they both have to agree if it Willets or doesn't, even though sometimes they don't. But the scores are then tallied at the end, with the higher score winning the chance to sponsor a Good Mythical Morning episode, which I guess they could have before, but it's kind of like a symbolic victory, I guess. Gut checks. This is more of a quick-fire comparison of a bunch of different products in a product line. Every product is ranked by each fella in a similar vein to the Food Feud videos, but this time it's a score out of 100. At the end, all the scores are compared to each other, and the best of the product is determined. Pretty cut and dry with no extra segment, just them two tasting a bunch of different stuff and giving their thoughts. 100 Years Shuffleboard. Coined as the Shuffleboard game, this consists of Rhett and Link guessing from which decade a thing, particularly foodstuffs, but sometimes more conceptual things like hairstyles and toys, came from. This guessing is done in the form of a shuffleboard competition, wherein Rhett and Link shuffle weird theme-appropriate pucks to a particular decade to lock in their guess. Each participant is allowed an intentional bump, where they intentionally shuffle their puck into the other person's puck to change their answers. So for example, Rhett could have been on the 1950s spot, and Link could shuffle his puck into Rhett's puck to move him to the 1980s or something like that. The winner of the game is then awarded a theme-appropriate prize, which is enjoyed in the episode's Good Mythical More. Running jokes. Alright, so this is just a blanket entry just to encapsulate the existence of many running jokes throughout the series, some of which we'll go into later, but any show running this long with this amount of personality put into it will have at least a few running jokes. I like your boots. In the episode How to Talk to Girls, way back in Season 1, Rhett and Link discuss ways to approach and talk to girls. This leads into compliments, where they both agree one needs to compliment a girl or a woman on something other than their physical appearance, because that kind of comes across as creepy. Rhett immediately poses the option of complimenting her boots by saying,
I like your boots.
Which Link immediately disregards, saying that's too close to her physical appearance, and suggests complimenting her backpack or a patch on her bag, asking if she made it herself, which then leads into a whole conversation. But Rhett retorts, saying that his go-to pickup line has always been, I like your boots, in a particular way, and that it has always worked for him. Link continues, saying that folks shouldn't say that since it is way too close to complimenting her physically. They both continue arguing, with Rhett saying that no one wears patches and that complimenting her boots is fine because that's all you would know about her at that point, but Rhett eventually acquiesces and they continue on talking about how they met their wives. Afterwards, however, the pickup line of, I like your boots, becomes the go-to pickup line for any mythical beasts and has been referenced on the show countless times, with the most recent Good Mythical Evening in 2024 even having a nod to it. Good Mythical Morning is scripted. So this is basically true and false at the same time. They have scriptwriters and they have segments that are supposed to happen, unless you think Chase just serendipitously happens to be wearing his Easter Bunny outfit when it would be most convenient for the show for him to be wearing it. But the words they say are generally not scripted. There were some points later down the line where they were a bit too tight, but generally the show is just scripted segments with improvised reactions, so kind of true and kind of not. Dink it and sink it. A classic running line or gag thing that Rhett and Link say when they both have to eat something, but only when they themselves are holding the food. To explain, like, in the Gatorade gut check, they obviously didn't dink and sink every single drink because they were being fed the drink. At least that's my interpretation. They may just do it whenever they feel like it, but regardless, they both tap their foods together, i.e. the dink, and then eat it, i.e. the sink. Not too complicated, but just a fun running thing that they put on mugs and t-shirts and whatnot. Link is a very picky eater. To follow up on the Dink It and Sink It entry, we have Link, and specifically his pickiness. After the Dink It and Sink It line is spoken, we have generally about 50% chance that it'll be followed only with the sounds of Link gagging. Rhett generally has an easier time eating gross things, though there have been moments where Link has gotten the best of him. There also seems to be an endless list of very specific things that Link doesn't like, which sometimes causes the audience to be annoyed at him, but it's all harmless. I mean, my man just doesn't like olives, what do you want from him? Link hates tomatoes. To stick with the Link hating food theming, we have the most known thing that Link hates, which are tomatoes. To clarify in more detail what I was saying in the previous entry about how specific he can get, he likes ketchup and tomato sauce and really anything with tomatoes baked into the tin, but he doesn't like tomatoes being on things specifically, like sandwiches, tacos, etc. This is a classic fact that's even mentioned in the season 24 intro of the show, so Link does not like his tomatoes. Link loves cereal and peanut butter. Link does not solely have hate in his heart, however. He has a particular soft spot for peanut butter and frosted mini-wheats. Really anything that is peanut butter related he'll enjoy, and as proven in the Will It Cereal episode, he tends to enjoy things more solely because they're in a cereal orientation. So like goldfish, even though he thought it tasted weird, he just likes goldfish and milk because they are kind of like cereal. Birthday episodes for Link and episodes where Link gets things he wants generally involves either peanut butter or cereal. And it also sometimes involves cookie dough, but not cookie dough with chocolate chips in it, which I honestly get 100% because they put way too many chocolate chips in cookie dough. This is completely a digression, but I just want to say I completely agree with Link on that. A chocolate chip cookie dough should not just only be chocolate chips. Rhett loves beans. Contrasting Link, Rhett tends to have more likes than dislikes when it comes to food. He's a man who likes various meat-based products, cheeses, and most prominently, beans. Particularly baked beans, I believe, but anything in a bean format seems to do the trick for him. On birthday episodes and episodes that cater to our resident tall boy, you can rest assured that beans will be involved in one way or another. Special thanks to Willowana3179 for suggesting this entry. Rhett loves the McRib. Our final entry on our tour of the likes and dislikes of Rhett and Link food-wise, which is Rhett enjoying the McRib quite a bit, which is explored most heavily in the Deconstructing the McRib episode, but it comes up from time and time again. And here's another side note, I also love the McRib, so I understand when Rhett can't help but blurt out his undying love for the product. It's a McRibber thing, you guys just wouldn't get it. Rhett and Link are Southern boys. Rhett and Link both grew up in North Carolina, so they have a good deal of the South in them, even though they've lived in California for quite some time. This comes up typically whenever one of them says something in a goofy way, and the other one repeats what they said in a Southern accent to be funny, or when someone mentions something like an obscure country music star, or some sort of hyper-specific experience that only someone out in the Carolinian boonies would understand. As you can see, we can't. Many times during activities in which Rhett and Link are forced to participate, Rhett and Link must be blindfolded, so to indicate that they are in fact blindfolded, they say, "As you can see, we can't." They've done this since the episode Epic Rap Battle, and since then it's pretty much just ingrained in the Good Mythical Morning zeitgeist at this point, and it doesn't even really register as a joke anymore, like, it's just a thing you say when you're blindfolded. And it's honestly weird going back to the older episodes when they get blindfolded and they don't say that, so it's pretty much definitively the thing you say when you're blindfolded. I mean, I bet you if I was blindfolded, I'd say that just out of pure reaction. Jen. This is another well-known crew member, though this one left the show in 2019 to pursue other interests. She was apparently a social media manager and membership program person, but nonetheless, Jen has left a lasting impact on Good Mythical Morning, most prominently with Thursday Means Mail. The mail episodes of Good Mythical Morning. This has started season 2 and continues throughout the series for years to come. Mail episodes were mostly iconic though, during the years where Jen would be the designated mythical mail person. They begin the series with hot gluing things sent in together to make a boulder, which was eventually encased in bronze. Then they started a mythical mail museum, which you could see a live stream of, but that was discontinued, and then it just became them looking at some fan mail every once in a while. As I said though, Jen was a real draw. Link's hairstyle change. This is the first controversy of the show that we're going to discuss. Basically, starting season 9, Link had a completely different hairstyle than the one he used to have up until that point, which really came to a shock to some. I mean, I hate to admit it, but I was definitely one of the folks who didn't like his new hair, solely because it's different, but it's 100% grown on me now. Now he's had the hair longer on GMM than he hasn't, so no one really bats an eye at it, but if I remember correctly, he wanted to change his hair so it didn't look so youth pastory, and he thought it made him look like he was trying to seem young, so I guess it's understandable why he'd let it grow out. Boop, 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 boop. Boop, 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 boop. Research. Another running phrase that's said is when the fellows mention research they've done. Running as far back as season 1, it started because Rhett says his ears perk up when he says research like an alarm. Ironically, it was Link who does the boops because he says it was like a news station, but Rhett flatly says that he does not do that. But the boops were the thing that ended up sticking, so it became the theme of GMM research. They do it less now, mostly because they don't do much research themselves anymore, but I'm sure if an episode happens that they did research in a recent episode, they would probably still do the boops, so it wasn't like an intentional thing that they stopped. Mythical Summer. This was a summer segment of Good Mythical Morning, basically the same as a normal Good Mythical Morning, though with some summer-based activities and vibes, and they would only post a couple times a week, with some even having guest hosts. Historically, Rhett and Link and Good Mythical Morning have taken breaks throughout the summer, but since 2018, they've started posting some stuff during the summer. There's also a Good Mythical Weekend segment that started the crew during Mythical Summer 2023, which was kind of fun. A particular highlight in my opinion was when the Game Grumps hosted. Overall though, I understand why they do it, but I'm not someone who thinks there should always be new GMM content for all eternity, and I kind of used to appreciate them taking breaks. Boot Scootin' Boogie. Boot Scootin' Boogie is an iconic song by Brooks and Dunn that both Rhett and Link randomly became obsessed with when trying to remember the words to it in a Good Mythical More episode, playing adult Mad Libs. It really became popularized by clip channels and folks of the like using the clip in various GMM compilations, because the episode from whence it originated isn't even particularly popular. It's almost like that scene from The Office where Andy and Dwight start singing Country Roads and randomly get into it. You know, it's a fun time, and of course Rhett and Link are great at belting out songs randomly, so it's no wonder that even though it's only mentioned that one time, it became so iconic. This is the quickest and easiest way to capture the appeal of Good Mythical Morning. Rhett and Link aren't actually friends. This is a theory I believe is kind of disproven by the previous entry, but to go into it, folks believe that the whole Rhett and Link friendship thing is like Mythbusters, where Adam and Jamie never liked each other. It's really easy to think this kind of stuff because it's very convenient that they just happen to still be friends for so long, and just so happen to be so successful, but I think it's almost like a chicken and the egg situation. You know, folks say that they can't be good friends and have this good of chemistry, and have this once in a lifetime kind of partnership with your best friend, just because that never happens. And I really think they know that they have such great chemistry and work well together, and that's why they are such good friends in the first place. So stuff like the Boot Scootin' Boogie in the previous entry are iconic moments that really can't come out of a writer's room. So I do think they actually are friends. Mythicon. This is a convention that happened in 2022 from October 28th to 30th in Austin, Texas, ran by the Mythical crew and Rhett and Link. It was pretty expensive, but I believe most thought it was well worth the price. With live shows and events and a weird dance party thing, it seemed like a really interesting time and a crazy experience for anyone who enjoys the whole mythical experience. I also found another Mythicon, but I think that's just a myth-based Renaissance fair thing, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Good Mythical Morning. Nonetheless, I just wanted to mention them since it seems kind of interesting. Mythical Society. This is a subscription-based Patreon thing that Mythical Entertainment launched in 2019, which shows primarily behind-the-scenes footage and exclusive content, most notably exclusive Good Mythical Morning and crew content. There are 4 tiers, with the first one being free and only requiring an email to sign up for it, and the first, second, and third tiers have more and more exclusive content as the price goes up. It kind of has taken the place of the hosted Rhett and Link community website now, even though the community is still up, but the best way to be a card-carrying mythical enjoyer is to sign up for this thing. That being said, exclusive stuff on here won't be coming up too much on the iceberg, mainly because I'm not a member of it, and I don't think most people are. I think the main thing that Mythical Society helps with is that it helps you facilitate a connection to Rhett and Link and the other crew members, and it also gives you some cool discounts at the store, so you kind of have to be a big superfan to get your money's worth. There may have been some controversy around this when it first released, but it wasn't too big, and most folks understand the need for this type of thing, especially since the YouTube partnership thing turned out to be a disaster, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll discuss that later. Rhett and Link's children. Rhett and Link both have children who all make appearances and are mentioned on the show frequently. Link has 3 children, Lily, Lincoln, and Lando, and Rhett only has 2 children, Locke and Shepard, which I mentioned in order of age. While Rhett's children have appeared as early as Season 2, opening mail with their father, it wouldn't be until Season 5 that we saw all of Link's children. Understandably, the older ones don't make many appearances, but Shepard and Lando have gained sort of a cult following, and they seem to be the ones who like being on Good Mythical Morning the most. Generally, they all seem to have their own thing going on, which is probably for the best. The youngest of them would be 15 and 14 at this point, so if I were to presume, they probably don't want to be attached at the heel of their father's internet show anymore. Charles Neal. Keeping with the theme of family, we have Link's dad Charles, who has appeared on the show pretty frequently, partially because Link and his father have a podcast called Dispatches from Myrtle Beach. Besides videos about Rhett and Link's dads, Charles has appeared in some food reviews and as the host of the Crazy Cookie Roulette Challenge. He's pretty universally loved and does a surprisingly good job on camera, so. Good Mythical Morning April Fool's videos. On April Fools, GMM generally does a special kind of video that you'd expect for the holiday. On the earlier seasons, they would just talk about April Fool's stuff like a normal episode, but later down the line they started making the episodes themselves the jokes, such as having the whole episode in Spanish, tasting invisible food, and my favorite, when the episode was about them spending $1 million at the dollar store in a game format, but they spent the entire episode explaining the complex rules of the game. They generally only do these kinds of videos if April Fool's Day lands on a day when they would do a GMM, so they don't always do one every year, which makes the GMM April Fool's videos pretty special. Post Malone. This is arguably one of the most iconic guests on Good Mythical Morning, just because of how well he fits in and the fact that he's actually a big fan of Good Mythical Morning, which you probably wouldn't expect. Because of this, he comes on the show pretty frequently, and he's almost universally loved by the community. Probably the best example of a good guest appearance on Good Mythical Morning, and fans have quickly accepted him into the GMM canon with open arms, unlike how they normally treat guest appearances. Rhett and Link are married. A little bit of a joke entry, but you'd probably be surprised with the amount of folks who think they're a couple just at a glance, most likely due to how much they are around each other and how they argue like an old married couple. Of course, with a cursory glance at Google, you'll find that it's not true, but I don't know, they seem to have to clarify that they're not married a lot, and it seems a little bit like they're protesting a little too much, if you know what I'm saying. Sporked. This is basically a grocery food ranking website started by Mythical Entertainment, and for a while it was pushed pretty heavily by GMM. It had a big impact on Good Mythical More, with many episodes including Jordan, Gwynedd, and Danny from Sporked, helping Rhett and Link rank random grocery store things on the moors. To clarify again, these happened on the moors, and not the main show, which was a little weird because the moors are generally supposed to be the intimate, less scripted part with just the crew and Rhett and Link, and if they had a guest on the main episode, then that guest as well. But these sporked moors would appear on many episodes that didn't have anything to do with them. Some fans didn't like Sporked being pushed so heavily on the moors, but at the end of the day, it's still technically a mythical product, so it's not like they're just bringing in a random sponsor. However, it took away some of the intimate feel when they were present. We got vasectomies together. Another iconic episode of Good Mythical Morning. Basically what it says on the tin. They got vasectomies together. It was pretty hyped up and they talked about it a lot beforehand. And in the end, they did just that on Good Mythical Morning Season 12. It's brought up as one of those, whoa, look how crazy it is that they did that things a lot, but at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, they got vasectomies with each other in the room. It doesn't really seem that crazy or big of a deal to me. GMM is too corporate / out of touch. A running theme of what some in the community think. This is basically the idea that GMM started off as this nice, warm, intimate thing, and now it's just a big company that churns out clickbait thumbnails and ideas solely designed to be popular. And I think there's some truth to that, but definitely not to the extent some folks think it is. I mean, if they just wanted to make as much money as possible, they could be doing a lot crazier stuff, and they wouldn't care about the community opinion as much as they do. That being said, of course they're trying to make videos that get popular more so when they were in Season 2, just because this is how the nature of this stuff works. I talk about this in depth in my analysis video, so I'll keep it at that, but yeah, it's a pretty common opinion that crops up every now and again. GMM hashtag war. This is a fun trilogy and community outreach thing that happened in Season 4. Rhett and Link find that their hashtag GMM is competing on Twitter with Good Morning Memphis and Good Morning Maryland, so send their fans to tweet at the news stations telling them to change their hashtag since hashtag GMM is already taken. It ends up with GMM taking the hashtag and the news stations changing their hashtags after some concessions are made, the foremost being that Rhett and Link made news jingles for both of them. But sadly, neither news channel really ended up using the Rhett and Link jingles, but they mentioned it on their news stations and everything ended up nicely. Strangely enough, Maryland asked for a lock of both Rhett and Link's hair, so I guess they also got that. You're So Loud. The most popular and well-known Good Mythical Morning compilation channel. She basically started the whole trend of making Good Mythical Morning compilations, and she was pretty widely accepted by the community, even being mentioned in an episode of LTAT. Her videos basically consisted of Rhett and or Link acting in a particular way, with some edited words on screen, comedic zooms, and some charming royalty-free music. Sadly, she stopped making videos and quit in 2020 after Jenna Marbles was cancelled for doing blackface. Not really like shoe polish blackface, by the way, it's more like impersonating Nicki Minaj blackface. Anyway, I guess You're So Loud was upset Jenna Marbles was cancelled and thought that the community didn't care for its creators. In any case, she left and stated she would not be returning because she didn't want to get cancelled like Jenna Marbles did, which is definitely a little bit fishy to me, but who's to say? I mean, it seems like a lot of people want her back, so they seem to mostly agree with her assessment. Rhett and Link were Christians. This is probably not surprising, but Rhett and Link were raised in a Southern Baptist environment in North Carolina for most of their lives. They actually started out being entertainers by doing Christian music for their church, and also for the internet Christian youth program Jelly Telly as the fabulous Bentley brothers who sang about the books of the Bible. Watch Ear Biscuits if you want to hear about specifics regarding their Christian upbringing, but in summary, Rhett and Link were Christians for most of their lives. You may notice I said were. Well, that's because Rhett and Link's spiritual deconstruction. In 2020, Rhett and Link both had a very public falling out with their faith, or rather they decided to discuss their falling out on Ear Biscuits. It was really a big deal because no one had seen them discuss their faith so intimately, and it caused a really large backlash in the Christian community, and I'm sure many Rhett and Link fans who saw them as some wholesome Christian internet hosts jumped ship as well. If you've watched this channel for a bit, my channel, you won't be surprised to know that I'm a Christian fella, as I've mentioned it many times when it comes up. And of course, I was disappointed to hear how badly they feel they were wronged by their faith. Personally, I think a lot of it came from them being brought up in a really strict Southern Baptist community where there's a lot of judgment and not any room for disagreement. So once they were in a non-religious environment in California, they weren't really comfortable in their faith to allow other ideas to come through, or realize that they could have been taught incorrect things by people who thought incorrect things. This obviously isn't a religious or political channel, so I won't go too much into it, but I will say that I'm genuinely happy that they found a belief system they're comfortable with, and I think that them being open with their audience was a very good thing, and ultimately led to a lot of good. Link can't be trusted with sharp things. Alright, this is definitely a tonal shift, but yeah. It is a running joke that Link cannot be handed sharp things because I guess he isn't careful enough with them and will become a danger to himself and others. This even goes as far as when he's given little flag things for the game, somehow he'll always find a way to be a danger to those around him. I think this stems from a story Rhett and Link told where Link cut himself trying to open a Christmas present with his father-in-law, and then passed out because he couldn't handle the blood and him being cut. Link is neurodivergent. A very common assumption with Link especially, given his unique tastes and unorthodox temperament on the show, or with stories he tells on the show, like what I just said about him passing out from cutting himself by accident. Folks think Link either has autism or OCD. In fact, Rhett on the first episode of Good Mythical Morning flat out states that Link has OCD. But at the time, OCD was kind of a catch-all term, so I'm not sure how serious he was with that. I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, but it's clear from stories on Ear Biscuits and GMM that Link has some degree of neurodivergency. Then again, I'm not a doctor or anything, I'm just around a ton of neurodivergent folks all the time, so I probably just see everyone as being that in some way, but nevertheless, it's something that folks talk about and hasn't been specifically confirmed yet, so. GMM fell off. A sadly common community thought, basically the point it falls off changes depending on whoever you ask, but many people do believe that at some point GMM stopped being as good as it used to be. If you really want to hear my thoughts on that, I'll direct you again to my analysis video, but in short, I think this just comes down to the show changing and evolving over its decade-long run, and people having nostalgia for how things used to be, or just not being intrigued with the current topics that they discuss and the activities that they do. Which is totally fine, but it probably doesn't actually speak to the quality itself of the show, as they probably think it does. Tier 3, Analysis. So this tier is going to cover some more in-depth things that if you're a big fan of Good Mythical Morning, you probably don't necessarily remember, but when I bring them up, they'll be like, oh yeah, hey, I remember that happening, or I remember those like types of videos being on. So this will be a pretty interesting tier, I hope. Rhett and Link birthday episodes. So on each of our hosts' birthdays, they tend to do something special, something that the other person will like. So obviously on Rhett's birthday to do something cool that Rhett would enjoy, and on Link's birthday to do something awesome that Link would enjoy as well. Generally, they also give each other like nice gifts and stuff. It's all very wholesome. One of my favorite ones was when Rhett got a pizza cake for his birthday, as created by Link. And Link was very like proud of it and really waiting for his reaction, and he was so happy when he enjoyed it. So these are all very, very nice and wholesome episodes that I'm happy that they still continue to do to this day. They may be a little less intimate nowadays than they were back in the day, because obviously Link isn't going to spend 6 hours making a pizza cake anymore, but who knows? I haven't seen one in a while. So Rhett and Link met with Obama. This was back in 2014. A bunch of YouTubers actually met with Obama and other White House officials. This was because Obama was having a summit that the main purpose was to get YouTube folks to tell their 18 to 25-year-old audiences how to sign up for Obama's Obamacare thing, since 18 to 25-year-olds are disproportionately uninsured. I do not have a citation for that. That's just what Obama told me, I guess. But yeah, Rhett and Link definitely met with Obama, and they talked about it in the episode where they bring up bullying with Obama. Some folks like to get conspiratorial about this, but you know, this goes more into like weird Obama conspiracies, not necessarily conspiracies specifically about Rhett and Link. Though, I mean, it is completely canon that there is an exclusive event that Rhett and Link met with Obama, so maybe some like clandestine wackadoodle stuff happened, but you know, it's possible. I obviously wasn't there. Snot mic up puffed he. So this comes from a Good Mythical More episode where Rhett and Link were playing a game called Mad Gab while having a dental mouth opener thing inside of their mouth. The meme of the game is basically you are shown a collection of words that sound like an expression, and you have to guess what the expression is. So like, for example, luck in for glosure being the words, and the expression is looking for closure. So looking for closure, looking for closure, you get it. It's pretty cool idea. So Link got the words snot mic up puffed he, which is really hard for me to say because obviously it sounds like the expression, and you might already know what the expression is from me saying it. Not my cup of tea, which Rhett and literally everyone else figured out almost immediately after Link first said it. But for the life of him, Link had no idea what he was saying. It got to the point where he was, I kid you not, verbatim saying, "It's not my cup of tea," but he still had no idea what the expression he was saying was. And he was completely clueless. This like just him going over the phrase, "It's not my cup of tea," over and over again went on for 5 minutes. And he was just completely clueless until the very end, where one crew member just showed him a teacup, and then he figured it out. This became a big meme in the Good Mythical Morning community just because of how goofy it was that it took him so long to figure it out, because it seemed so obvious. I'm sure in that moment it's less obvious, but... Link can't use knives. This goes into specifically Link not being able to be given knives, where Link shouldn't be given knives because, as we discussed previously, he's bad with sharp things, but this is specifically with knives. For example, he likes to go for like the big sharp knives, but he doesn't know how to use them very properly. There was an episode where Rhett was trying to teach Link how to gesture without using the knife, but Link just wasn't getting it. And overall, it's just a given that Link shouldn't be trusted with weapons in general, but he has a particular proclivity to go for knives. Gifticality. This is a spot on the mythical wheel wherein once it lands, they donate an amount of money to a different charity. This started with them just giving money to St. Jude, but it's expanded to different causes and charities. One common one is the Trevor Project, which prevents like LGBT youth from killing themselves by doing stuff. I don't really know specifically what they do, but it seems like a good cause to me. The fun thing is that Rhett will often slyly like tip the wheel to go on the Gifticality spot when it's like right next to it, just because they want to give money to these good causes, which is always a nice thing. James and the Shame. This is Rhett's solo country music band that does not include Link. It started sometime after his spiritual deconstruction debacle happened, and the debut album was an album by the name of Human Overboard, with many songs that reflect those feelings that Rhett was feeling at that time, which is interesting because it's, inundated with like the country music genre to be kind of not necessarily like that. So it definitely shows off his musical chops, and it's 100% just a personal thing Rhett uses to express himself, which is why Link is not involved whatsoever. But don't worry, Link has dispatches from Myrtle Beach, so I guess it's even. Rhett and Link were engineers. Rhett and Link both got degrees in engineering from NC State. Link got his degree in industrial engineering, and Rhett got his degree in civil engineering specifically. Rhett, pretty far into his college life, wanted to actually switch to communications, but decided against it. They actually ended up both working in standard engineering jobs for a good long while, which you can learn more about from Ear Biscuits, but it was a big long time where they were just working normal jobs, doing the music thing on the side, and then that obviously evolved into something a lot crazier than being engineers. So they went that route instead. Honestly, it kind of, them being engineers kind of comes up a little bit from time to time in the episodes, in the sense that, like, Link in particular wants things to be organized and, wants things to, like, make sense, whereas Rhett is a little more, like, creative in a way, which I would think civil engineering is more creative and industrial engineering is more, like, tinkering out processes. So a lot of people kind of dog on Rhett and Link and be like, how in the world could they be engineers? But, Rhett hates cats. A running theme of GMM is that Rhett is definitely more of a dog person than a cat person. He thinks that cats are very unaffectionate and selfish, and that they will eat you if you die, which I'm not sure if it's true or not, but Rhett seems to think so. He mostly just plays it up because he likes upsetting people who like cats, really. But generally, he just seems to be someone who doesn't vibe with cats very well, which comes up on the show a lot. Rhett and Link should go back to talking about life stories. This is a pretty common sentiment that you see, the idea being that Rhett and Link should go back to that comfy feeling of the old episodes where they weren't doing games and skits or anything and were just talking about things that went on in their life. Now, personally, I love the old life story episodes, but I completely understand why they had to change. They say it themselves that they kind of just ran out of things to talk about, and eventually they just needed to actually do things for the show to continue. If you like life stories from them, then you really should just listen to Ear Biscuits, which I know I just keep promoting a lot, but it's really like the thing to go back to if you want the old sort of stuff. Ear Biscuits is generally just hours of them talking about their personal lives and thoughts, so it's basically that exact same thing. Tokyo. This is a running joke that started in 2014. Basically, whenever anyone says Tokyo in a GMM episode, Rhett will yell, like they would do in those Japanese game shows, while an edit of a cat very clearly trying to get a laser pointer and a bell sound plays. Rhett said at first he didn't really like the bit and got kind of irritated by it, but he's began to enjoy it again, and it's kind of made a bit of a comeback in recent years. Rhett has crazy dreams. This is more of something from the earlier seasons, but one of the main personal things that they would talk about is their dreams. And this primarily was Rhett's dreams. This could be because he kept a dream journal, so he was primarily the one that had an ability to control them. Mainly, I think it's just one of those things that some people have. Like, some people have crazy dreams and some people don't. I, in particular, literally only just dream about me waking up in the morning, so it's just kind of a nightmare. But Rhett has some really awesome dreams. Some people say he makes them up, but that's more of a controversy that we'll get into later. Primarily, though, go back to the old episodes and listen to Rhett talk about his weird dreams, because those are pretty nutty. Rhett and Link's parents. Link is not the only one to have a living relative. Rhett also has a father and a mother, and Link has a mother as well. In more recent seasons, though, they bring their parents into more episodes of GMM, such as having their moms take lie detector tests and trying to make their dads laugh and have specific responses on a Father's Day episode. None of them really have the star power that Charles does, though, and they all mostly seem to dislike being on camera. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. If I had a child who was a YouTube star and I was more of a salt of the earth kind of person, I probably wouldn't really want to be involved either. Cotton Candy Randy. A running character in the GMM cinematic universe, he was introduced in the episode Cotton Candy Taste Test and has made frequent appearances since. The idea is that he's an immortal entity of pure chaos and evil that happens to be the go-to guy for anything involving cotton candy, sweet treats, and any other thing that requires his sweet nothings. He's probably the most successful and well-known GMM running character, and that success can be chalked up to Jordan Morris's ability to make cringe comedy and awkward humor. Never Wet Our Pants. Another very iconic episode from way back in season 4. This is testing a spray that is supposed to make things repel any liquids. This is mostly iconic because they seem to not think the product would work very well until they actually tested it and were extremely surprised, making their reaction to it extremely entertaining. A fun fact, this is my brother's favorite episode, and it's actually a lot of folks' favorite episodes considering it sits at number 18 for their most popular episode. And it's really an episode that sticks in every fan's mind when they think of GMM. Guest appearances are bad. Is a very common community thought. Basically, guest appearances can really sink or swim depending on who the guest is. Whenever there's a guest who doesn't really vibe with Rhett and Link, it becomes very plainly obvious. But some take that to avoid all guest episodes, and I used to be in that camp as well, just because it's always so much better when it's two fellas who know each other really well and have a great chemistry, rather than them and then some random person they just met for the first time. That being said, I believe there are some really great ones out there. Already mentioning the Post Malone and Game Grumps episodes, but Ben Schwartz has a really great chemistry with them both, and I also enjoyed Brittany Broski as well, but there's no question that the lion's share of guest episodes are kind of misses. Winface. This is another older recurring spot on the Wheel of Mythicality. Winface was basically a thing where you would post a picture of your face with the hashtag GMM Winface or something like that to enter. Once the wheel landed on that space, an entry would be chosen to share and would be displayed on the screen. Then that person would get these weird gifts, such as a personalized message from Rhett and Link, which was just a message that purposefully had the winner's name poorly dubbed in. Or you would win a fan selfie, which was just your picture poorly cropped out of its context and attached to a stick. Rhett and Link would then pose awkwardly with a stick, and then that would be the selfie. The idea is obviously that they're supposed to be bad gifts, and I think they may have gotten some merch as well, which is nice, but they've discontinued this thing in recent years. GMM 22. Alright, this one's kind of a doozy, so I'll try to be quick with it, but this is the time when YouTube partnered with Rhett and Link to make GMM in 2017, which was halfway through season 12, and they both decided to split the show up into 3 separate segments instead of just one video. Not only that, but it was very differently produced, less off the cuff, and more professional. It was almost universally disliked by both the fans and Rhett and Link themselves. It's what everyone thinks of when they think of the dark age of GMM. I of course talked about this more and their thoughts and the impact this had on GMM in my analysis video, but for now I'll leave it at it was the decision they made to mix up the format, but ended up being way more than they could chew on. So the show went back to the standard format starting season 14, which was roughly a year later. The Mythical Show. Alright, I thought it would be fitting to talk about the 2 attempts to change the GMM format up next to each other. Now, the Mythical Show was actually an expansion of GMM into a 20 to 30 minute long episode that was released on Thursdays between seasons 3 and 4 of GMM. The show was definitely very well produced and had many segments, but it didn't really end up taking off and definitely wasn't worth the effort that was put into it. No one really disliked it, so it's not a controversy, but it just wasn't what people wanted in their GMM programming, so the normal format continued in Season 4. Killing Rhett's beard. This is a very infamous Season 3 episode of GMM. Infamous due to the Wheel of Mythicality ending, and due to it being Stevie's first episode. The ending had them slapping each other, which happened a couple of times before, but this time it had them slapping each other at the exact same time. Now in previous episodes where the wheel commanded Rhett to slap Link, Rhett seems to slap Link a lot more gently, especially compared to how Link slaps Rhett, which Link always just goes ham on him, so this was a time when the other shoe dropped. Rhett seems to think that Link slapped him way too hard when they both slap each other in that episode, and then starts smacking him again, and then Link gets angry trying to slap Rhett afterwards, because obviously you can't slap him twice, and it was just a really surreal experience that you have to see to get an idea of what I'm talking about, but like I said, it's a really infamous incident in the mythical verse. Song Biscuits. This is a fun segment that Rhett and Link did back in 2015, partially to promote Ear Biscuits to an extent. Like I said, Ear Biscuits used to be a guest-oriented podcast sort of thing, so as a fun addition on the weekends, they would have the guests help them make songs with topics picked by tweets. Some turned out better than others. I, for one, really enjoyed the Cat 9 live song with Hannah Hart, but overall it was just an enjoyable thing to promote Ear Biscuits they did. Everything is boiled for safety. A running theme for the food videos back in the day was the pretty nutty stuff that Rhett and Link were made to eat. Some stuff being things that you really shouldn't eat. When there are instances of Rhett and or Link needing to eat something that was possibly dangerous, the crew would simply boil the thing in hot water to kill all the bacteria. This became kind of a meme with the community, believing that the crew will feed Rhett and Link literally anything, so long as it's been, quote, boiled for safety. Now that Rhett and Link don't eat as much dangerous stuff, it doesn't come up as often, but it's still a saying that you can buy on t-shirts and mugs and whatnot. GMM Animated. This refers to a couple different things. For one, there are a couple of folks who've animated clips from Good Mythical Morning that have become pretty iconic parts of the community, such as Worth a Kid's Kettle Chip episode animation, How'd You Get Back There? Many were brought up and shown in the Mythical Summer 2021 episode, GMM the Animated Episode. There's also the episode, GMM the Animated Episode, in Season 20 that showed off some stop-motion animators who animated some Good Mythical Morning moments. Earlier in Good Mythical Morning history, though, there was also the Wheel of Mythicality animated series by Indie Mouse, who is now a very popular video game look into her lore guy. The Wheel of Mythicality animations were hosted on the Good Mythical Morning channel and uploaded on Saturdays. One cool fact that I was made aware of by friend of the channel Neo McCarthyite was that the animator for the Five Nights at Freddy's song was actually Vivziepop of Has Been Hotel fame. Obviously, this was made before she did anything extremely significant, so this was most likely folks' introduction to her animation style and overall presence. You Can Do It, Serpent King! In a Season 6 episode that covered tips to help a friend through a crisis, the crisis being Link having his head stuck in a tank with a bunch of snakes that he's afraid of, they go through an article and try to help Link through the crisis. Now, step 2 was to call your friend by an encouraging nickname, so Rhett went with the nickname Serpent King to bolster his confidence around the snakes. Link seems really genuinely freaked out, and no further steps seem to help him that much until we get to step 6, which was rally support. Rhett then gets the whole crew to chant, "You can do it, Serpent King," to Link. As he pushes the snakes closer to Link, Link then begins to freak out, but still stays in the box, and once he's let out, he congratulates himself by referring to himself as the Serpent King. Now, he says it didn't help him at all, but he's referred to as the Serpent King from time to time, even to this day. Catch the Fish with Granddad. In a Season 13 episode talking about ridiculous mascots, Link randomly starts flopping his hand in front of Rhett to annoy him. Rhett then tries to catch his hand by smacking it in between his two hands. He then says it's like a fish, and that it's like he's on the pier with Granddad. He also notes how difficult it is to catch, and they continue doing that for about another 3 minutes without doing anything that has anything to do with the topic, referring to the activity as Catch the Fish with Granddad. Now this comes up a couple more times in the future until they actually come up with rules for the game and make an episode titled, "We Invented a New Sport" in 2023. This kind of killed the joke and like the spontaneous nature of the game in my opinion, but clearly Canadian live stream. I also talk about this one in more detail in my analysis video, which I'll probably mention a lot more in this video, so don't get too comfortable. Now the short version is Rhett and Link found a drink that they liked as children that they believed was discontinued, called Clearly Canadian, which ended up having a promotion thing to bring the drink back, which was discovered in an episode of Good Mythical More. They then strike up a deal with Clearly Canadian and get an affiliate link to buy the drink, with the catch being that Rhett and Link will host a big cool live stream with everyone who buys a case. Now, shipping delays and a lot of communication issues later, the live stream never happens, even though the fellas advertised the live stream multiple times on GMM. 7 or so years after the original mention of Clearly Canadian, a YouTuber by the name of Scott Kramer made a video discussing the controversy, on which Rhett and Link leave a comment explaining what happened. It was a bit of controversy back in the day, but that was quickly dwarfed by Steven Crowder. As I mentioned in my examination tier, Rhett and Link were going through a bit of a faith deconstruction in 2020. Now Steven Crowder, a conservative commentator guy, made a video analyzing their deconstruction podcast videos and made some criticisms. Very soon afterwards, Steven Crowder was mentioned in a meme review episode they did, and Stevie calls Crowder a mean name when his Change My Mind meme comes up. Steven then comments on the video, GMM deletes the comment, and then Steven gets mad again. I talk about this more in depth in my analysis video, so if you want me to go into larger detail, you can check that out, but it's kind of a dumb controversy that I'm honestly frankly sick of talking about. Fry Daddies. This comes from the Will It Deep Fry episode. Basically what happens is that they're frying up some lemons and then they both independently kiss the deep fried lemon for some reason before trying it. This leads to the joke that every lemon that they would sell at their hypothetical fry place would be kissed by the Fry Daddies, i.e. themselves. Since then, every time they fry something, they're referred to as the Fry Daddies, and it's become a common title of honor for them, even though, in my opinion, they don't really seem to be very good at frying things, so. Rhett is a doomsday prepper. Rhett throughout GMM shows a great deal of interest in the apocalypse and being prepared for it. In one episode, he bought Link a great deal of apocalypse supplies and bought himself a greater deal of apocalypse supplies with some fun extras. Anytime a tragedy is referenced, or even the future in general, he refers to the oncoming apocalypse, taking it almost as a given that in the near future we're going to be fighting for scraps after a partial extinction level event. Though he's been talking about it for the whole of GMM, which has been on for about 12 years, so maybe we'll be okay after all. Rhett is a conspiracy theorist. Rhett also has a proclivity for conspiracy theories, or at least he likes to act like he does. He probably doesn't actually believe any in his daily life, but when on GMM, he'll go into detail about various conspiracies we've talked about on the show. Now, funnily enough, on the more associated with their Illuminati episode, i.e. the part where they would be more of themselves, Link seems to be more inclined to believe the Illuminati stuff than Rhett does, but that's when they aren't putting on their GMM personas. Really, on GMM though, Rhett's gonna be the one to discuss and describe conspiracy theories from the point of view of believing them when conspiracy theories are to be discussed. Rhett's nicknames in high school. This is a surprisingly old running joke for GMM. Rhett has had many nicknames in high school that have been discussed as far back as 2006, and it started way back in Season 1. Basically, Link will be discussing something, and then a random phrase will stick in Rhett's brain, and he'll say that that was his nickname in high school. The running idea is that Rhett will try to make Link laugh at this joke, because he literally never does. The only time he almost does, he flat out states, "This isn't funny, but we're laughing." You can find the whole list of Rhett's high school nicknames on the Rhett and Link Wiki, but they seem to have stopped doing this running joke in recent years, most likely because Rhett kind of forgot about it. Jason. This is going to be the final specific crew member that we're going to discuss. The first crew member Rhett and Link ever had. Now, he manned the camera and originally did production, editing, and writing for the earlier episodes. He was basically the third guy Rhett and Link would talk to about episode ideas and whatnot. But he left in 2014 before the show got really crazy popular. Though he did bring GMM from 159,000 to 1.9 million subs in his tenure, so he's really the third guy behind most of the GMM early days. Good Mythical Crew. This was a Good Mythical Morning spin-off show that aired on Saturdays and showed behind-the-scenes goofs and adventures when it came to what the crew has to do to get the show up and running each week. It was done in a sort of documentary sort of way, with Stevie starting each episode off with saying what they had to do each week, giving context to the events that followed. It ran from 2016 to 2017 before being abruptly stopped when GMM 22 began. It was generally really positively received, with Alex and Mike being the real standouts. So much so that they actually got their own show on the pre-Mythical Kitchen channel This Is Mythical, which we'll be discussing a little bit later. Rhett and Link do too many food videos. Many folks in the community are not necessarily happy with the content changing to solely food-based videos in the past years. Some of them want more discussion episodes, but I think that GMM just has their niche, and you kinda need that to keep a program running for as long as it has. Now, of course, there are some non-food episodes every now and again, but from what I've seen, this is mainly a criticism from older fans, meaning fans that were a fan of the show back in the day. Rhett and Link are bored of GMM. This just goes back to the perceived lack of variety on the show. Some take this to mean that they're just overall bored of the format and just continue to do this solely because it's lucrative. The fact that the format changes up from time to time may also create this perception, as Rhett and Link are trying to find something interesting to make out of GMM. At one point, Rhett and Link were also discussing when at what point they would want to end the show, before GMM 22, so it's hard to say if this is correct or not, but personally, I still think they enjoy making the show, though it's hard to say if they would still make it or not if it wasn't as popular. This is just their internal thoughts, so it's pretty hard to disprove or prove this theory. Link always loses. GMM is host to many competitive games between our two hosts, Rhett being the more competitive one and generally coming out as the victor in these games. Of course there are exceptions, but generally if the game involves darts or throwing things or really any sort of finesse, Link will tend to lose. This lore has started to be disputed in the community, however, with a playlist starting to make the rounds of all the times Link wins against Rhett, but the consensus is still that Rhett tends to win the gold. Rhett and Link fanfiction. Fanfictions are a staple of any online community worth its salt. Generally, these are between Rhett and Link, but sometimes it can involve other parties as well. Sometimes there are POVs where you're the lucky guy or gal spending a night with our beloved internet teeners. This generally used to be kind of an underground part of the community, but with episodes where Rhett and Link read out fanfiction being more common, the practice has really been spotlighted in recent years. Rhett is attractive. Not to be confused with the fanfiction portion, a great deal of folks think that Rhett, especially in his current form, is a very attractive man, and by any objective standards he is. This gets to the point where there are many fan edits and whatnot about him, even trying to find pictures of Rhett for innocuous thumbnail related reasons on Pinterest. We'll give you a bunch of thirsty captions and images of our host with his shirt off looking sensual. I'm not judging of course, but it's a pretty common idea if you know where to find it. Chase is attractive. Another member of the mythical crew that got some thirst thrown his way was our main man Chase. This was more of an early GMM thing, but whenever Chase would do things, especially when he was more of a background guy, he would get a lot of comments saying how attractive he was, especially when he would bring out his chinchilla. People go nuts for a chinchilla, and people also go nuts for some costumes. I mean, need I say more? Jen is attractive. Probably the mythical crew member who got the most thrown their way was Jen, especially when she would wear something that would show off her particularly muscular arms. This was also more of a prevalent thing back in the day, but it seems to me like all the guy commenters had a thing for Jen, while the girl commenters had a thing for Chase. Of course, that could just be my perception, but nonetheless, Jen is no longer on GMM, though I'm sure she still has heads turning on account of that gun show she's got going on. Link has herpes. To cap off our discussion on the crew's attractiveness, I thought we would talk about Link, specifically his herpes. Not the weird sexual herpes, but lip herpes. I mean, I guess it's the same virus, but sometimes on the show, Link comes on with his lip sore and has to endure comments mentioning it every day until it goes away. He also mentions it in other scenarios when people are touching his face to warn them. Regardless, there's nothing we can do about it, but one thing's for sure is that Link definitely has herpes. The Scroll-O Shuffle Rules. Shuffleboard is a pretty complicated game, but even more so when Rhett and Link play it. As such, there are times when the two are at odds when it comes to determining what's fair play and what's illegal shuffleboard-wise. During these troubling times, the Scroll-O Shuffle Rules is consulted. The scroll is basically what you would expect, a large, ancient-looking scroll that sits in the cabinet next to the shuffling zone for easy access. Written on the scroll is basically any conceivable scenario that could occur when playing the game, and what to do when that scenario occurs. When the Scroll of Shuffle rules is consulted, fanfare plays as Rhett and Link take each end of the scroll and slowly unfurl it until they find the scenario that they're looking for. Some folks find it a little tedious, but I think it's pretty fun. Special thanks to Riley6488 for suggesting this entry. 5 weird ways to start a fire. Now this is a pretty standard episode to start, but notice that there is a warning at the beginning. The real moment folks remember this episode for was when they start a fire using chlorine and brake fluid. A huge fireball erupts out of the bottle they use and lights Link's chair on fire. It starts exploding when they were like right next to the bottle, but they thankfully get out of the way. Then they douse the ignited flames with water and Eddie tries to stamp out the flames. They then say that what they did was extremely stupid. Apparently what happened was that Eddie had tried the experiment before with only a small amount of brake fluid and chlorine, and it only smoked and sizzled a little and didn't do too much, so Eddie tells Rhett and Link to add more than he did for his experiment pre-GMM, which resulted in the fireball. The chaotic nature, the comedic timing of the blast, and the possibility that Rhett and Link may die in a fiery explosion. What more can you ask from in an episode of GMM? Rhett's ambient massage song. This is a very calm and relaxing song made by Rhett in order to calm whoever listens to a state of absolute euphoria. Listening to the song can be detrimental to one's health though, due to the fact that your heart rate can slow to a crawl and eventually stop beating entirely due to being so relaxed. Many times when a song is needed in an episode, this song will be added as a fun Easter egg by Rhett. Since its inception, it's been very popular around the community and has made many subsequent appearances from its original appearance. Chase's various costumes. Chase used to be the prop manager and designer for GMM, so it makes sense that he would generally be the one to wear the costumes he makes. On the International Dart Taste Test episodes, he plays Chase the cartographer. Many times he wears addendums to that costume depending on the type of food that Rhett and Link will be trying, and many characters are also played by Chase that have their face masked or otherwise covered up, as folks would know it's Chase based on his iconic appearance. One such character was Mooshell. This is a fancy cow in a tutu that would dance with Rhett and Link, or both, in their Frozen vs. Fast vs. Fancy Food videos. The running thing was that whenever someone would guess the correct fancy food, they would get a fancy pants dance with Mooshell. Many of the folks in the community were quick to point out that it was Chase in the cow costume, but Rhett and Link fervently denied this. They even brought Chase out and had him dance with the lifeless Mooshell costume to prove that it wasn't Chase. Soon, Mooshell left because everyone kept saying she was Chase, which hurt her feelings. Mooshell then left for a while before triumphantly returning a year or so later, only to be killed off in April of 2023. Now to my knowledge, Mooshell has not returned yet, but she's come back from worse, so really anything's possible. Chunk. Speaking of characters, we have the experimental rock group Chunk. Basically a parody of pretentious British musicians. They would mostly be seen arguing or trying to make music in extremely impractical ways, but for the most part, Chunk was over before it started, and they've only appeared a few times before never being seen again. Character bits are getting old. As the presence of characters for specific series has increased, a large swath of the community has begun to believe that the character bits are just annoying, take too long, and just overall aren't very funny. I can't really blame them for how they feel, but I personally tend to like the cohesion character bits bring to the show between episodes. So like, you could always expect to see Mooshell on the Fast Fancy Frozen episodes, or you could always expect to see the evolution of Stuart and Jennifer's relationship on the Food Feud episodes. I don't know, I tend to not really have a problem with them as long as they don't take too much away from the episode and aren't too scripted. GMM is recorded in advance. This is now a fact, but didn't always used to be. Originally, every GMM episode was recorded on the day that it was released to my knowledge, though as episodes became more complicated and Rhett and Link's schedules got more cramped, they started to have to record multiple episodes in the same day and upload them throughout the week. If I'm not mistaken, I think they also changed their clothes in between shoots to give the illusion that they're not recorded on the same day, and take pride in trying to maintain that daily recorded show aesthetic. I'm sure some may learn this and have a little bit of magic taken away, but I'm not really bothered by it if that's what they have to do. Link almost hits Chase with a dart. This is an infamous moment in international taste test history and GMM lore. Basically, Rhett is explaining how the game is going to work, and then I guess as a demonstration, Link decides to throw a dart at the map without looking. Chase just so happens to be moving towards the board and adjusting things, and so the dart almost hits Chase, but thankfully it doesn't. Link then apologizes and gives Chase a hug, but the moment was forever scarred in the GMM canon. Rhett and Link can see through their blindfolds. A common theory that folks float around is that Rhett and Link can see through their blindfolds when they're participating in blindfolded activities. The evidence for this is basically that they can somewhat do things in their blindfolds, I guess. Not super strong evidence if you ask me, but some also believe that they put on blindfolds as an excuse to do goofy stuff for the camera. You know, like stab each other with forks and stab the table instead of the food. It's fair to say the people who think this probably have never been blindfolded because they don't seem to understand that you can't see when you're blindfolded, and so you can't see what you're doing. Now, there are more moderate proponents of this theory who believe that Rhett just doesn't close his eyes while blindfolded when Link does, which I can probably get behind since Link seems to be the type of guy who would just close his eyes if you covered them, while Rhett is really competitive and will take any opportunity he can get, so long as it's not technically cheating. Link cheats. This is a confirmed fact. Link was very unabashedly cheating at the nasty candy apple scary Susan game by checking the way of the brooms to choose the biggest one. Rhett then calls him out and it becomes a bit of a fuss, but this calls into question Link's ethicality when he plays games on GMM because, I mean, if he's cheated once, he'll most definitely try to cheat again. Amazing game show cheaters. Sticking with the theme of cheating, we have the episode Amazing Game Show Cheaters, which randomly became the most popular GMM episode. Even though it was just a standard episode and it didn't have anything to do with food, and Rhett and Link don't even do anything out of the ordinary. But with 32 million views, many folks wonder why this one out of all the others got so popular. I think what may have happened was it got caught up in the standard Watch Mojo top 10 list kind of content, where they have the big arrow and everything, and it also doesn't have Rhett or Link in the thumbnail, so it just looks like a normal listicle type of thing. And so it got picked up by that crowd of folks, that side of the algorithm that made those things super popular. Anyway, it's still a mystery why that one got so popular, as it's not really very iconic in the community, but it is known in the community for being the weird outlier that got insanely popular for no discernible reason. Season 18 teasers. This was a controversial change in Season 18 that removed the iconic "Let's talk about that" intro and added in a teaser for the upcoming episode, something that would show a funny moment or whatever, but fans really didn't like this because arguably "Let's talk about that" is the most iconic phrase of Good Mythical Morning, and so they changed it back relatively quickly. They probably did this to increase viewer retention since there's always a drop-off in videos that have an intro, and people don't generally like sitting through intros, but removing that iconic beginning would definitely hurt the cohesion of the series. It would be like if I removed my beloved "Hey Hey Ho Ho" intro. It's just completely inconceivable. Good Mythical More is better than Good Mythical Morning. Many folks enjoy the laid-back vibe of Good Mythical More, even more so than the more structured Good Mythical Morning. This sentiment is common among longtime fans who used to watch Rhett and Link back in the olden days, but it's also common among anyone who's a really big fan of Good Mythical Morning. Good Mythical More is a really great addition to the show, but I think that's really where it should be. The reason it's so great is because it's a continuation of a more structured show, so if we only had the unstructured part of the show, it'd be much less interesting in my opinion, and I mean, I guess they could record Good Mythical Morning and then record a Good Mythical More after it and just not upload the Good Mythical Morning episode. I don't know, maybe I'm just overthinking this or something. Overall point is, yeah, people like Good Mythical More a lot, myself included. Good Mythical Evening. This is a pay-per-view exclusive Good Mythical Morning event that took place in 2021 and dealt with more adult topics and had much raunchier humor, with the hosts and the crew drinking and having a real fun time. There have been 4 Good Mythical Evening attempts and 3 more Good Mythical Evening shows, the latest one in 2024 I had the pleasure of seeing myself, and since then they've all been received positively. This is definitely a symptom of Rhett and Link becoming much more open and less family-friendly in the past few years. I for one also really enjoyed it, and was extremely surprised with how absolutely blasted both Rhett and Link got. Needless to say, I'm pretty excited for the next one. Link has anger issues. Ending this tier off with a theory, Link many a times has been shown to get really angry on the show and throws fits, for lack of a better word. Some people take this to mean that Link just has anger issues and is genuinely a really angry person. It's pretty clear though that he plays it up for laughs most of the time, and just kind of turns what he's really feeling up to 11 for performance purposes. This has led to some unintended effects we'll be discussing later, but for now, let's keep this at base level with folks just thinking he has trouble controlling his anger. Tier 4, Dissection. Alright, so this is where entries are going to start getting a lot more in depth and probably things that you didn't even remember happened. But some of you may have a general understanding of most of these. But hopefully there's going to be a lot of stuff you guys haven't heard of before. So, Mythical Moments. This is a fan compilation account like You're So Loud, except a lot less concerned with gender marbles. Compilations have a lot less personality and are more straight to the point, so no one really knows who runs it, but it's definitely not affiliated with Mythical Entertainment, as some in the community really believe. It really is just a fan making compilations that have not really much source of personality to them. Mythical Bits. Not to be confused with Mythical Moments, this is a Mythical Entertainment affiliated channel that Rhett and Link used to make short skits, maybe something to fill the itch that was left behind when they stopped doing Rhett and Link content. Though I think that that's starting to get filled with the Wonder Hole thing. Regardless, sometimes they include the crew and stuff, but for the most part, it's just a Rhett and Link skit channel that really has nothing to do with GMM. Buenos y Míticos Días. This is a Spanish dub of Good Mythical Morning that was started in 2015, with the first dubbed episode being the Extreme Ice Bath Challenge. The first mention of this, though, was in the April Fool's episode 7 Last-Minute April Fool's Pranks, wherein the episode posted on the main channel was fully dubbed in Spanish, and the episode posted on this channel was in English. Sadly, I can't find who the dubbers are, but they do an absolutely amazing job, giving great energy to their performances as Rhett and Link. Particularly in the ice bath one, where obviously the dubbers aren't in an ice bath, and so they just had to dub over Rhett and Link wincing and whining in Spanish, which is definitely something to hear. The channel was updated periodically with Spanish dubs until it stopped posting about a year ago, with the last episode posted being the Spanish dub of the Subway vs. Jersey Mike's food feud. They've had a few times where they stopped uploading dubs for a bit, and then uploaded a bunch at once a few years later, so maybe there will be more dubs in the future, but for now, our Spanish-speaking viewers are going to have to wait for the most recent seasons. Special thanks to Milquetoast for suggesting this entry. The Rhett and Link Vault. This was just a short series they did in between seasons 1 and 2 of Good Mythical Morning. They basically just watched their really old videos and gave some behind the scenes and reactions to them. The first episode, White Boys Visit Compton, is actually lost though, which I'm putting lost here in air quotes since I'm pretty sure they don't want it to be found. It actually was privated almost immediately after it was uploaded, so I honestly doubt anyone has ever seen it, but in any case, Rhett and Link Vault was just a kind of behind the scenes thing they did for a bit during their first GMM break. Padma Lakshmi GMM. This is a controversial guest episode with Top Chef host / model Padma Pravarti Lakshmi. The crux was folks thought she was very rude and short with Rhett and Link, at one point spitting into Link's mug, and afterwards some of the community was nasty towards her, so GMM put out a statement not to harass her. Personally, I didn't think she was that awful or anything, but she definitely seemed to be a bit above it. Keep in mind she's a real influential and pretty famous person, so she may have thought the show was kind of beneath her, but I'm probably just being sensitive. In any case, she comes up pretty frequently as the worst GMM guest. We're still good. This is a catchphrase that originated in the debut episode of Good Mythical Summer 2019, Will It Barbecue, sponsored by the National Pork Board for some reason. Anyway, in this episode, Rhett and Link try to barbecue things using various objects, so the objects being used to barbecue are the willets, and not the actual thing being barbecued. One instrument for barbecuing they try is a toilet, which of course does not go well since porcelain does not hold up very well when hot charcoal is placed on it. Should have gone with propane. Anyway, the toilet quickly starts breaking apart and shattering at the seams, almost exploding porcelain shards around Rhett and Link. And every time it did, they would both look around and check themselves, saying, "We're still good!" in a goofy southern accent to confirm that they were okay. Every time they did, a little animation played with a branding iron sizzling the words "We're still good" onto the screen. It got to the point where they said it within seconds of one another saying it, saying the catchphrase when Rhett couldn't flip the patty, and when the patty just fell to the ground, with each time the animation playing. This soon became a running catchphrase, with the phrase being said whenever some sort of twist or turn happens, causing things to go unexpectedly wrong. The animation would always play as well, even though it seemed like one specifically made made for the Willett, so the context as to why the animation was a branding iron is probably lost on folks who see it in other episodes. This then got turned into a Cards Against Humanity apples to apples style party game called We're Still Good, where one player has a prompt and the other players have to give cards that fit the best or the most funny way with the prompt, and one card is chosen to be the best one. The twist being that the prompt is a scenario that is going wrong, and the cards that are presented are the answers to that prompt. So like, I was driving to the store and my car ran out of gas, so I had to use blank to get back home. And the cards would be like, oh, my best friend Emily who likes to sneeze, or something goofy. I don't really want to explain the rules of Cards Against Humanity to you. The card game was relatively well received, though seen as a bit pedantic, but yeah, the catchphrase continues on to this day. Special thanks to DangNabbits4622 for suggesting this entry. Rhett loves Hawkman. Rhett has a pretty big affinity for Hawkman, which has come up on the show once or twice. GMM doesn't really talk about superheroes often, but on the 2 times it has, Rhett has brought up Hawkman. He says he enjoys Hawkman mainly because he identifies with hawks after an experience with a drunk man sitting on a bucket that he said he didn't want to discuss, so. I do wonder if he still likes Hawkman though, since it was last brought up in 2014. He hasn't stated otherwise, so I'm just going to assume it's still his favorite. GMM Pippa Blackout. On January 18th, 2012, many YouTubers refused to post a video in protest of Pippa, not to be confused with the Personal Information Protection Act, which to my knowledge is a pretty wholly good thing. This was the Protect IP Act, shortened to PIPA, which was some goofy copyright thing that has to do with websites. It didn't end up passing, which is good, but a lot of YouTubers who have been taken down or censored if this ended up passing, which is why it was such a big deal on YouTube at the time. To date, I believe this is the only time that GMM went black on a regularly scheduled GMM day. Sextember. This was a month on Ear Biscuits in 2021 where Rhett and Link would talk extremely openly and candidly about their sexual experiences and sex in general from their perspective. It was very jarring, and overall I believe it was pretty helpful for some folks, but it was something no one could have thought they would do back in 2014. It actually ended up bleeding a little into October, but in my opinion, like I said, it was a very healthy thing for them to do, for both their audience and themselves, and it further cemented the shift that they took towards an older audience. Link's real name is Charles. This is kind of a reference to a Sporked episode of Good Mythical More where they were tasting Lunchables and Jordan was baffled by Link's real name being Charles, but it's also kind of an obscure thing to know since it never really comes up. Link's full name would be Charles Lincoln Neal III, just like his father, except I guess he would be the second. Good Mythical Evening 2022 Crash. Remember when I was talking about Good Mythical Evening and mentioned 5 attempts but 4 shows? Well, the second show didn't happen the night it was intended, and instead was pushed back due to Moment House not being able to handle the traffic. On the night of September 1st, 2022, the countdown ticked down to 0 and the starting soon graphic was shown. Then a technical difficulties graphic was shown after a few minutes, which was changed to put the blame on Moment House since it was their fault. And then an hour after the show was supposed to start, they packed it in and told their fans that they were going to make this right and that they were not going to be able to go live that night. It was then rescheduled for the next week and all ticket buyers were given access to the new show, but for some who took time off work and had people watch their kids, this wasn't really an adequate solution, thus the controversy. The show on the 9th went off without a hitch though, so it seems that all was forgiven. Link vs. Jen rivalry. Before Jen left GMM, there was a rivalry going on between Link and Jen. In the episode, We Go to Bridesmaid Boot Camp, Jen ends up throwing a bag of flowers straight at Link's face while Rhett and Link are trying to catch bouquets. Since then, Link and Jen were at odds with one another in almost sort of brother and sister sort of way, where they would just mess with each other all the time. I remember a specific instance in Good Mythical More where Link just started randomly pinching Jen for no reason. Then Jen started pinching him back. It really was, like I said, a brother and sister sort of thing. Sadly, the rivalry had to come to a close once Jen left, and without Jen, crime just has no punchline for Link. Rhett and Link make up stories. Rhett and Link got up to some pretty crazy stuff when they were younger and still tend to get into some crazy situations to this day. Some believe a little too crazy mayhaps. Not a super common sentiment, but some folks think that Rhett and Link just make things up. This was more of a thing back in the day where they told a lot of stories on GMM, but The fact that they don't tell stories on GMM anymore just kind of proves this incorrect. I mean, they could have just made up stuff for all eternity if they wanted to, but they ran out of stuff to talk about, so that would mean that they would actually have to have happened to them for them to talk about it. Will It Penis? This is a hypothetical Will It episode posed by Rhett during the Will It Chip episode. For some reason during the episode when they were trying yak penis flavored chips, Rhett kept accidentally inserting the word penis into random phrases, asking Link when he was on the fence about the chips, would you rather just have a straight penis? When he clearly meant to say, would you rather just have a straight chip? Since they were talking about the dips at that time. This all culminates into Rhett mixing up Will It Chip with Will It Penis, and I think I'm really ruining the comedy for this moment here by dissecting it, but that's kind of what icebergs are for, right? Anyway, Will It Penis? The idea is still in the running, guys. Let's make it happen. Forest Patrol. Special thanks to Florida Flamingo Girl on Reddit for suggesting this. This was a short animated segment that played on Mythical Show, if you remember when I talked about that. So it's basically following the escapades of two forest rangers, one that's a stickler for rules and a bit green, and another that's grizzled and pretty much insane. It always ended with them meeting some eldritch abomination and them trying to solve the situation. It was honestly the best part of the Mythical Show in my opinion, and it kind of reminded me of a forest-themed Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, if you all remember that show. But of course, since the Mythical Show didn't stick around, Forest Patrol went away with it. 10 Feet Tall. 10 Feet Tall was a show hosted by the aforementioned Alex and Mike, coined as Mythbusters if you removed all the science, preparation, and core values. It followed Mike and Alex as they did various wacky things that weren't really Good Mythical Morning related. So like, one episode they set up a kind of slasher movie obstacle course thing, I guess just for funsies. I mean, that's what the Mythbusters kind of did, so maybe it was a pretty apt comparison earlier. Anyway, the show was pretty well enjoyed, and it garnered a sort of cult following. Sadly, the show was abruptly stopped once GMM 22 began, and This Is Mythical was rebranded to Mythical Kitchen. It is actually pretty dang hard to find episodes of this now. There is a playlist that says it has all episodes of 10 Feet Tall in order, but it actually only has episodes of Mythical Crew in it, which were completely different things. The only way I could watch it was to sign up for the free tier of Mythical Society and use my one unlock for the month to watch an episode, which was the slasher movie obstacle course thing, so if every episode of 10 Feet Tall is completely different than that, and my one frame of reference for the show was completely inaccurate, then blame Mythical Entertainment for paywalling the show. If there are other ways to watch it, feel free to let us know in the comments, but to sum it up, it was a pretty well-liked show that ran from July to October of 2017, that now to my knowledge is only viewable on Mythical Society. Special thanks to Joel Zepphead for suggesting this entry. Danielle and Richard. This is a soft-spoken, polite, and very strange character created and played by Rhett. Basically a forest-dwelling man who has trouble understanding our customs and has a dead bear badger thing on his head that he calls Richard and talks to and has conversations even though no one else can hear it. Danielle and Richard have appeared quite a bit and folks actually tend to like the duo, which is good. Most people seem to like the interactions between the two characters in Link, who has to play it straight and treat Danielle as a respectable cast member. Rhett also has to play Danielle very timidly and awkwardly, which he too has to say in character, which is kind of fun to see. Rhett and Link were introduced by their agent. Another theory that exists based upon the sole thought of, hey, you know this thing they said? What if they were just lying about it? Basically the idea that Rhett and Link aren't friends and didn't meet in elementary school, but are just an industry plant made to seem genuine. I mean, there's plenty of pictures of them when they were young together, but I guess that could have all been staged. It's another case of people not really wanting to believe in something that's genuine and very rare in the world, so not really much credence, but I doubt many who watch the show sincerely believe this. The Life Straw Incident. Alright, here's more of a fun one. In a Season 9 episode, Rhett and Link decide to try out the Life Straw, a straw that purifies any water you put through it, and it seems to work really well when they drink water from the LA River. Of course, the straw doesn't filter chemicals, so that could be a problem as well. Then they try to drink each other's urine using the Life Straw, which if you don't know, the Life Straw is just going to remove impurities from the urine, so like the bladder bacteria and whatnot, and that's literally going to be it. Obviously, when they drink each other's urine using the Life Straw, they're kind of expecting it to just turn into like water or something, but then they're in for a very rude awakening when they realize they literally just drank each other's slightly purified urine, and of course start gagging and can barely get it down. Life Straw was understandably not very happy with this demonstration of their product, and it caused some controversy. Link also at one point accidentally drank the unpurified cat litter water in the episode, sucking the water partially through the life straw but blowing the rest of it into what was supposed to be the purified cup. He then looks at the cup and comments that it looks yellow, possibly because the water isn't purified yet since it didn't go through the straw, and then drinks it, with everyone freaking out because he basically just drank completely unpurified water mixed with dirty cat litter. Rhett tells Link to not worry about the cameras at this point and wash his mouth out in a pretty direct and stern way, while Link tries to laugh it off. This wasn't necessarily the part that was included in the incident when the life straw incident is discussed, but it was another big part of the episode, so folks thought I should mention it. Good Mythical Moms. Some more wacky side characters, the Mythical Moms are basically just parodies of stereotypical Southern mothers, Loretta and Linkita. They come on whenever they have some sort of family crafty activity going on, or if they just feel like dressing in drag that day. But in any case, I think they're fun additions and come up from time to time, though they've stopped having them on nowadays, with some believing that they want to step away from it because it could be seen as transphobic. If that's the case, then I guess I can see why, but I don't think something like that would come across as offensive. If that was a reason, it probably would have just been out of an abundance of caution. Rhett loses by 1 centimeter. This happened on, I believe, the first International Taste Test episode, Strange Condiments Taste Test. Link was winning up to the last choice, which was a condiment from the UK. Rhett plays some mind games with Link, trying to get him to make a choice between UK and South Africa, instead of just aiming for Rhett's dart, which was roughly between the UK and South Africa. Link takes the bait and aims squarely for South Africa, and gets pretty close. Unfortunately, the sauce was from the UK, and so Link was 37 centimeters from the UK, and Rhett was 18 centimeters from the UK, bringing the totals to 198 centimeters for Rhett and 197 centimeters for Link, causing Rhett to freak out because he lost by 1 centimeter. A great moment for the show, and arguably what catapulted the series into a mainstay, due to those sorts of moments being a possibility with this sort of game. Link stabs Chase with a dart. Alright, so we're going from a fun moment to a not so fun moment with the International Taste Tests. On the International Chicken Taste Test episode, Chase comes out in another fun costume, this one being a motorized air-inflated chicken that it kind of looks like he's riding on. One that he seems pretty proud of, honestly. At the beginning of the episode, Chase asks if the costume is loud, mostly because the motorized fan that's powering the chicken, and Rhett and Link both agree. Then, Link starts staring ominously at his dart and says, "Do you know what will fix the sound issue?" And Rhett says that's not going to fix the sound issue, you're just going to pierce his chicken. Link then runs up while Chase literally says, "Please don't," and then begins stabbing the chicken costume viciously with his dart, very nearly stabbing Chase in the knee because Link doesn't know how the costume works. He then continues to stab at the costume until Stevie, thank God, yells at him to stop, and that all the crew are standing there with their mouths agape from that honestly pretty insane moment. Rhett tries to defuse the situation with a bunch of cock jokes, but you could cut the tension of the rest of the episode with a knife. This is something that Link has apologized for many times since it's happened, and he's shown off how much he loves and cares for Chase many times since, even during Mythicon. On the next episode, Link was barred from using darts and had to use french fries with ketchup. Even with all that, man, that was honestly one of the most difficult moments to watch in GMM history, and it caused a great deal of bad feelings towards Link. Chase is related to Rhett and Link. Alright, let's do another Chase one since the last one was kind of upsetting. This one is a totally real theory that people believe that Chase is related to Rhett and Link in some way. This goes back to an older comment Chase said on GMM where the only way to work on GMM is nepotism. I think that's really the only evidence there is. No one really takes this super seriously, but he kind of has that sort of youngest brother energy going on at times. Come to think of it, those three do kind of have the stereotypical archetypes of the oldest, Rhett, middle, Link, and the youngest, Chase, sibling thing going on, so maybe I'm starting to get behind this theory, guys. Rhett wore a fake beard. Another theory discussed by the group on the infamous mythical conspiracy theories Good Mythical More. This one is actually proven, however. During Season 10 of Good Mythical Morning, Rhett and Link were filming a particular scene in Buddy System where Rhett had to shave his beard to look like he was back in high school. Some episodes were recorded before that and some episodes after that, but during the time between him having shaved his beard and it growing back, he actually wore a fake beard on GMM and presumably in public, either to not ruin the surprise or because he genuinely looks crazy without his iconic beard. Some particularly cynical folks even believe he wore a fake beard because he needed to sell his mythical branded beard balm. Whatever the case, he hinted at himself wearing a fake beard a couple of times, but has never outright told everyone it's fake. but it is confirmed that during this time he had to have worn a fake beard, and the beard he was sporting was fake. Rhett's beard stroking. Speaking of Rhett's iconic beard, we have the infamous episode Petting Rhett's Beard. Now, during this time, they had a segment sponsored by Squarespace where they would look at submitted weird websites called The Internet is a Weird Place. The website they looked at today was a website called Bristler, a site where people could meet up to quote-unquote stroke each other's beards. Rhett ended up making an account and connecting with someone named Jeremiah Benjamin, who they brought on the show for some consensual beard petting. What I think may have eluded both Rhett and Link is that Bristler is basically a dating and hookup site for those who are attracted to people with beards, so the guy pretty clearly thought this was a date, or at least some sort of sexual thing. To be fully transparent, I always thought this was a bit to like how crazy the thing was, but I can't find anything about this episode or anything about this guy besides the fact he was a pretty small-time actor, but not really a comedic actor or improv actor or anything like that. He's not talked about anywhere else GMM related. Plus, keep in mind this is Los Angeles, and so you throw a stone somewhere, you'll probably hit an aspiring actor. Anyway, after doing this research, I really can't tell if this was supposed to be funny or if this was a genuine thing they did for Good Mythical Morning. Something else that really sells it is that the crew really isn't laughing, and Rhett is a little bit short with the guy, and makes it abundantly clear that he's not attracted to him, and just thought this was a beard touching thing, though I don't know what he expected. I've probably gone on long enough for this entry, but in retrospect, it probably is one of the craziest episodes considering the circumstances of them actually getting with some random guy on the show who just thinks he's going to be on a date with Rhett, when in reality they thought it was just a completely non-sexual beard touch thing. Link is obviously just watching this all happen uncomfortably, which is also a sight to see, but that's enough about this beard thing. The Fabulous Bentley Brothers. This is the stage name for Rhett and Link way back in the day before they were doing GMM. They used to be part of a Christian TV show created by the folks who made VeggieTales called Jelly Telly. Basically a children's religious program that taught them Bible stories and whatnot. The Bentley brothers in particular would play musical interludes between segments about various books of the Bible. It's just something that's really funny to see them do in retrospect, considering they no longer believe much of anything they're singing about so confidently. Like, can you imagine these two folks singing about the first book of the Bible making Sextember or Good Mythical Evening? Not really too Good Mythical Morning related, but it's just a fun part of Rhett and Link lore I want to mention. Mythical crew content is oversaturated. A pretty common community idea is that the Mythical Entertainment puts out just way too much Mythical crew content, like podcasts and behind the scenes and what have yous. This is more of a Mythical Society members thing, I believe, because I really don't see any Mythical crew content besides the odd episode here and there. But as a side note, a lot of the community just for some reason hates the Mythical crew, like everyone, and don't want anyone besides Rhett or Link doing things, so don't take this criticism with much credence, especially since a lot of the community loves the crew. So it's always kind of a war between the enjoyers and dislikers of crew content. But in any case, some folks don't like when they put out crew content, which I guess is just their opinion, but I don't really see it. The Hey Hey Show. This was Rhett and Link's first foray into sponsoring other channels that didn't involve them back in 2015, and it started off as a show on a completely separate channel called The Hey Hey Show that was very similar to Good Mythical Morning, except it starred Candice Carrizales and Shannon Coffey. I assumed this was a show that was supposed to cater more towards teenage girls and whatnot, since Rhett and Link didn't think two middle-aged men would appeal to that demographic, but they were very blatantly an industry plant from Rhett and Link, with them being the sponsors of the whole show. Before the show even began, it had about 10,000 subs, but it really never got off the ground. Shannon and Candice weren't really friends in the same way Rhett and Link were, and it very clearly showed that they seemed to be a lot more like stoned, for a better word. I mean, the comedy they did was very slurry and random, but they did create the sniff taste test experimental thing that Rhett and Link did a couple of times on their show. Like I said, the first season was very GMM-like, and they got a lot of criticism for that, so on the second season they switched up to doing daily sketches, which was really the nail in the coffin, because sketches were on their way out in 2015. Unless you were doing short-form content on Vine. I found a few comments saying that Rhett and Link hosted some sort of contest to find a female Rhett and Link, and mentored them into creating YouTube content, but I can't really corroborate that with anything, so take it with a grain of salt. The show ended in July of 2015 and was literally never brought back up again. The show is completely privated now, but it still is up on the Wayback Machine if you're interested. Now the channel is rebranded as a Mythical Bitch channel that I talked about earlier, so it's fair to say that the Hey Hey Show has been sufficiently scrubbed from the Mythical Entertainment history, though the Good Mythical More episodes Rhett and Link did with Candice and Shannon are still up, if you want to get a feel for how their personalities were. Rhett is a psychic. This goes back to many instances throughout the show where Rhett is just very strangely good at any game or activity that requires the exhibition of some abilities of ESP. One that immediately comes to mind is after he drank a ton of energy drinks, he asks Stevie to think of a number between 1 and 100 and then write it down. And then Rhett writes down the numbers 71 and 17, thinking it would be either of those two. And of course, 71 was what she was thinking of. Given everyone's reactions, it was pretty obvious they guessed that completely out of the blue, which was pretty crazy, but there was also the time that Rhett and Link listened to a voicemail in a Good Mythical More segment. Something they did every now and again, but during this one, Rhett was accidentally having a conversation with the person who was over the voice line. And keep in mind this was completely pre-recorded voicemail that they hadn't heard prior. There was also the time that Rhett was vividly picturing an image of Jackie Chan with sushi, while Link was trying to send out via ESP an image of a man with a woman holding a bow. Though as Rhett states, Link must have been sending out the wrong image, because one of the choices that Link could have sent out was the one with Jackie Chan and sushi, so I don't know, many isolated instances of this. It's kinda confirmed, but legally I'll just have to say it's a theory. BetterHelp sponsorship. Alright, I definitely don't want to get too into the weeds with BetterHelp, but let's just say they're a less than reputable online therapy thing that is very popular to promote, especially channels that are into personal wellness and mental health like GMM is. For a bit, Good Mythical Morning had some episodes that were sponsored by BetterHelp, which caused a decent amount of controversy among those who are aware of their shadier side. I really don't know anything about BetterHelp, all I know is that they aren't very good or effective, and they probably sell personal data, so I stay away from that stuff, but folks were really upset when GMM took a sponsorship with them, seemingly not researching the company very much. To the casual person though, BetterHelp just kinda seems like an online therapy service, so I can see how they would take that sponsorship without really realizing the damage the company does, but that doesn't excuse it honestly. Link's comedically timed gag reflex. Now this is just a fun one that folks who have watched the show noticed, but Link's gag reflex seems to have a humor of its own. One that comes to mind is a smell tasting experiment episode where Link gags the second that Rhett says, "Octopus." But there's also when he drinks blood nog and starts gagging right after he says, "Did you not drink it?" to Rhett. And the time Rhett correctly reenacts what's going to happen once Link eats habanero for the 6 ways to cool a hot mouth episode, when they try lemons to see if that will help you cool your mouth. Overall, I think it's just fun to watch Link gag, but it's very funny to see him gag in such a way that it seems perfectly planned out. GMM has too many cuts now. This is a community sentiment that reflects that GMM is too corporate type folks, but this is a less biting and more practical, yeah, I mean GMM is fine, it just has too many cuts to different camera angles and whatnot. I mean yeah, if you go back to older episodes, you'll see that there were seldom if any cuts, and if you go to the infamous GMM 22 era, you'll see that cuts were very frequent, since they were trying to make the episodes much shorter. But they've cut down on the cuts and are actually making longer videos than they ever have. Not too big of a deal in my opinion, but I'm sure it caused some folks to turn away from the show if they were a super big fan of the more unscripted, unedited stuff. Rhett and Link are playing characters. This one is 100% true depending on how far you think of the term playing characters goes. Literally everyone who even has a semblance of a viewership on YouTube is playing a character, at least a bit. Unless you want to believe that Markiplier just talks randomly to himself alone when he plays games. But of course, there is a spectrum that this can go on. Rhett and Link are obviously trying to put on a show and are going to try to be funny when they're trying to entertain people, so in terms of, are they exactly how they are in real life on GMM? The answer is unequivocally no. But are they both completely different people? Like, Link never gets irritated at things in real life, and Rhett is actually a super soft-spoken and acquiescent person if you were to know him personally? Personally, I doubt it. That's because it's easier to be a more entertaining version of yourself, rather than a completely different human in front of a camera. Everyone has a crush on Stevie. This is separate from the blank as attractive entries, because this tends to get a little stranger. Stevie is, of course, an attractive woman, but she is also very outwardly a lesbian. Outwardly as in, even if you took the most casual look into Stevie lore, you would know that she is not attracted to men in the slightest. Now Stevie is also someone who wants to be funny and goofy, but doesn't necessarily love being on camera, and prefers doing producery things. Now of course she's been on camera before and hosted her own show, but she isn't someone I would think would appreciate the whole shipping and thirsty part of the GMM community, or at least would dislike it more than Chase, Jen, Rhett, and Link, but because of this, the thirst is pushed away from the normal folks who are like, dang, Jen's really bringing us to the gun show today, or, ah, Chase is so cute, I love him so much, to to the weird obsessive people who don't care about what Stevie thinks. Anyway, that's why it's lower on here, but there's also the casual aspect of it where mostly other women say they have a crush on Stevie because she has good fashion sense and what have you. So to put Stevie Thirst on a spectrum, it either goes from, dang, Stevie's cool, I have such a huge crush on her, to, oh my god, I'm so obsessed with her, I found her address and I'm sending her toenails as we speak, with not much in between. Rhett cheats. Now this is more of a theory than Link cheating, which he pretty brazenly does, but some believe that Rhett's string of wins against Link does not come from skill alone, and may have come from some shenanigans behind the scenes. Now they've done pranks on Link before, and let us know beforehand that, for example, Rhett is going to be able to get out of his straitjacket while Link is going to have a real one on. Who's to say this doesn't happen more often, and they just don't tell us to keep the Rhett always wins meme alive, which makes Link into more of a villain theatrically. Rhett also did cheat at cornhole once, but immediately backtracked it and said he was just trying to be cute, and it didn't count, so if you think that counts as cheating, then I guess there's your proof, but personally I doubt that Rhett cheats because he seems to be a really competitive guy and someone who would want to win fair and square, rather than resorting to shenanigans. Is it real hot? This is an older piece of lore that comes up surprisingly frequently, but I didn't know the context for it before doing this iceberg. Shout out to Straws44 on Reddit for suggesting this, but basically many times when the fellas are going to eat food that may be hot, or when discussing things that are hot, like fire hot, one will say, is it real hot? All goofy like. I thought this was just like a goof, but apparently it comes from a video in 2008 where Rhett and Link brought frozen chili popsicles to the California State Chili Championship. They offered the popsicle to this one guy and he immediately just tries it, just didn't ask any questions, and takes a small bite. Then after biting the chili popsicle, he asked if it was real hot. Like spicy hot, I'm assuming not stove hot. It's really funny because he doesn't even say it in a strange way, he just seems to be a normal guy who is kind of apathetic to the fact that he was eating a frozen chili popsicle. He ends up eating the whole popsicle after Rhett just starts shoving it into his face. And this guy is still like completely fine with it all and doesn't even seem uncomfortable. Rhett then just gives him the rest of the popsicle to finish, just because Rhett was starting to feel uncomfy. It's funny how they held on to him saying that because like I said, he says it like a very normal guy would. And it sounds nothing like their impression, but they still do it almost every time something hot comes up. Season 13 Renaissance. Now this is a very surprising thing that I came across while diving deep into GMM. In my GMM analysis video, I put the revitalization of GMM after the Dark Age, Season 12, at Season 18, but some believe that Season 13 randomly has a renaissance period. I don't want to keep referencing my analysis video, but to sum up, the start of GMM 22, the 4-segment format age, is pretty universally agreed to be the worst age of Good Mythical Morning. Now I put the darkest age encapsulating Seasons 12 to 14, and then there's a slight upward mobility Seasons 15 to 17, but some believe there is randomly a huge jump in quality and creativity in Season 13 specifically. This isn't extremely prevalent, but it does come up from time to time when mentioning when GMM started climbing out of its Season 12 slump. Michelle is not Chase. Michelle is a beautiful, independent cow person thing and is not in any way chasing a cow costume wearing a dress. You can't prove a positive, which is why it's still a theory, but you all need to stop with your awful conspiracy theories. This is why Michelle left people, because of this rancid community and their evil and horrid accusations regarding the strong, stunning, and brave cow-type creature that is Michelle, and that's all I'm going to say on the subject. Link got too drunk on Good Mythical Evening. On the first Good Mythical Evening, Link got pretty drunk from what I've been told. Stevie then had to cut Rhett off a little early because they needed someone to stay sober so they could continue the games. And Rhett started to have to be the sober best friend, and some say he was a little annoyed. Really no one was that upset that Link got drunk. More so the controversy was around the rest of the crew and Rhett seeming to not want him to be as drunk as he was. The common consensus is that Link was really the star of the first Good Mythical Evening episode. Not a really big controversy or anything, but some folks just want to see the crew and Rhett embrace the chaos, but I can see why they couldn't in a liability sense, because when you mix alcohol into that stuff, things can go dicey pretty quick. The community is impossible to appease. Much like any internet community, the Rhett and Link community tends to be at odds with itself. Some people like the crew, some people hate them, some folks want Rhett and Link to talk about stories, some folks want GMM 22 brought back. Like, It's completely impossible to please everyone, and the GMM community is no exception. It seems like no matter what Rhett and Link do, someone in the community will have a problem with it, and that's really just the way it goes with these sorts of things. So it's a pretty obvious thing to say, but I put it this low because it kind of invalidates all the community criticism I've mentioned. Rhett and Link are narcissists. Contrary to what you may believe, narcissists aren't simply particularly narcy cysts you get, but rather a personality disorder that reflects an unreasonable sense of self-importance. Folks believe that Rhett and especially Link are sufferers of this disorder, mostly due to them not really understanding what narcissism actually is. The folks who purport this mostly take this to mean that they are mean and make things about themselves, which is kind of like what they do since they are the hosts of the show, but I guess the feeling is more that they're not taking the crew and the people around them into account enough. See the Link stabbing chase with a dark controversy, which I guess I can understand a little bit, but the thing to keep in mind is that Rhett and Link both have a particularly self-deprecating sense of humor, and they like being the joke in a sense. For example, Link stabbing Chase was supposed to be one of those, hey, look at how crazy and nutty Link is things, and not that he actually thought people would think he was cool or something for stabbing the chicken costume. Though Link also did worse on the narcissist test they took on GMM than Rhett did, though they did get higher than the average person and scored roughly the same as the average US celebrity, so maybe there is a bit more credibility to this than I'm letting on. Link is a psychopath. This is arguably more of a stretch than the narcissism allegations, but this goes back to a lot of the same things I said earlier, more focused on Link. This kind of seems to me more of a, I don't like Link, so I'm saying he's a psychopath type of thing, but I mean, if you take some of the stuff he does completely out of context, it could make sense, and here's a real kicker, folks. Link did lose in the psychopath smell test to Rhett, proving that he has a worse sense of smell than Rhett, and thus proving that Link is more of a psychopath than Rhett. And if you want to take the Rhett narcissism allegation seriously, I mean, if you're more of a psychopath than a narcissist, then what does that make you? Fun little tidbit, the psychopath smell test was actually the first GMM episode that I watched, so. Rhett and Link M-Preg. Alright, lastly on this tier, let's talk about some M-Preg, shall we? This was shown a light upon on the fanfiction episode of GMM, but the concept of M-Preg is pretty nutty, so it has to be at least this tier for me. If you don't know what M-Preg is, it's basically male pregnancy. Not like a trans man getting pregnant, oh no. It's literally a penised man being pregnant with a child, and I will not go further into the mechanics of how that all works. Now, since our fellas are so loved by the community, and there already is plenty of Rhett and Link shipping out there, the next reasonable step is to throw reality to the wind and let one of our guys carry the other's child through gestation. This is actually a pretty common fanfiction idea with Rhett and Link, which may be surprising to some, but when there are two friends, no matter what sex or orientation, one of them is going to end up carrying the other's child. There's just no other way around it. Tier 5, Understanding. Now, this is going to be the tier where stuff starts getting more obscure. This is the last tier that's going to have information that I knew about after I made my Good Mythical Morning analysis video. And even then, it's only about like 4 or 5 entries that I knew after making it. So a lot of these are going to be going more in depth and use a lot of the previous entries as like jumping off points. So hopefully there's going to be a lot of stuff that you guys didn't know, or there's going to be some additional context that you all didn't have an understanding of. Because this is the understanding tier. All right. Max Greenfield guest appearance. So this was a guest appearance controversy that occurred in the Fried Super Bowl Party Taste Test episode. And our good old guest was, of course, Max Greenfield of, I believe, New Girl fame. I think he's from New Girl. Anyway, so the episode surrounded deep frying Super Bowl party foods and then trying them out. It was supposed to be a good old time where our friendos would fry things and then share them with the guests, and everyone would bite into some fried wings, but the problem was that Max Greenfield is actually a vegetarian, and they didn't know that before he obviously came on the show. And so obviously 90% of the stuff that they ended up frying up, he couldn't eat. And he just kind of ended up sitting in the background, twiddling his thumbs awkwardly. He tried to be a good sport about it, but overall, this was, definitely a really bad episode. The story goes that this is because Max's agent didn't tell Good Mythical Morning he was a vegetarian. And so, obviously, they had prepared for this episode in advance for a while beforehand, assuming that he wouldn't be a vegetarian. And then when they found out they couldn't just throw out all the food and do something completely different. They didn't have any time to pivot to something else. But obviously, most people in the community aren't going to know this. They're just going to assume that Rhett and Link or Good Mythical Morning was goofy and didn't ask Max Greenfield's agent for any sort of dietary restrictions. I put this kind of lower on the tier because you'd have to really dig to get the actual details of what happened here, and because stuff starts getting kind of crazy this tier, so I just wanted to ease us into it a little bit. You know, a little bit of a comfortable topic for people to get into. Hey, there's a Sprite in here! This is a pretty fun running joke that occurs in many episodes, generally ones that involve tubs or that take place in tubs and or any sort of liquids. Generally, inside of these liquids, there will be an unopened can of Sprite. It's not sponsored or anything, obviously. It's just a fun reference that goes back to the ice bath episode of Good Mythical Morning. Basically, for the context of that episode, Rhett and Link have to sit in an ice bath for 8 minutes, and right before they're able to get out, when they're both like shivering and stuttering and can barely talk, Link finds a can of Sprite in his ice bath, stops stuttering and shivering, picks it up, and then clearly says,
"Hey, look, there's a Sprite down in here."
He then opens it and then starts drinking it while Rhett is still stuttering and shivering. It kind of shows that a lot of the torture of the ice bath was psychological, because Link found something that took his mind off of it. He was completely fine. The entry itself doesn't necessarily relate to that specific scene in the ice bath episode, because obviously the ice bath episode is pretty popular, but just the fact that they redo that joke a lot. It's one of the more fun and subtle running jokes, and I tend to really like those sorts of jokes for Good Mythical Morning, so I definitely like this. The canceled Tommy Wiseau episode. In a recent episode of Ear Biscuits, airing September 23rd, 2024, a caller asked the question if there was ever an episode of Good Mythical Morning that was fully recorded but never aired. Rhett and Link then mused about an episode they recorded during GMM 22, featuring a quote-unquote eccentric filmmaker. From what they said, the episode was shot in an almost interview format, and during the interview there was a sketch where Rhett and Link were acting out a famous scene from one of the filmmaker's movies, obviously goofily and comedically. The director then got extremely offended at this and started shouting angrily, walking off the set right in the middle of the episode. Rhett and Link both state that they have the tape, but they will never release it publicly for legal purposes, even though Link kinda seemed like he wanted to. They also state that they aren't ambush journalists or anything like that, and they don't want to ruin their reputation with the director's booking agent, who would be really pissed if they released the unflattering footage of their client, so even if they wouldn't get sued for showing it, they probably wouldn't release it anyway. After this intriguing conversation aired, Mythical Beasts immediately began speculating, and the most common theory purported was that the guest was Tommy Wiseau, director of the hit theatrical drama The Room. The scene Rhett and Link played out was, according to those who believe this theory, one of the many scenes where characters are standing around throwing a football while talking, and Tommy most likely felt that Rhett and Link were making fun of him and got offended. This also makes sense timeline-wise, with GMM 22 starting in November of 2017, and the movie The Disaster Artist, a movie that Tommy was involved with regarding the making of his most famous movie The Room, being released in December of 2017, which was most likely what Tommy was there to promote. I definitely agree with this theory just because no other filmmaker makes sense in this context, and it's not like Good Mythical Morning talks with directors very often, so there isn't someone who would be more likely to be, as in like someone who was on the show before. And like I said, the timing, the personality described, and the unknown guest's description as an eccentric filmmaker all line up perfectly. But unless the footage leaks or someone outright confirms this, it's still only a theory. Special thanks to AntDemo1312 for suggesting this entry. Rhett is wearing a fake beard. This is not to be confused with the proven lore fact that Rhett was wearing a fake beard. This is the theory that he is still wearing a fake beard to this day. Evidence is that his beard stays the same clean-cut length and then randomly changes in style in later seasons, that his beard doesn't seem to gray that much. I think it kind of does, but that's just what the theory purporters say. And that he wore a fake beard once, so a fake beard wearer, always a fake beard wearer, I say. Clearly not many people really believe this, but it's still a theory that goes around every once in a while that kind of piggybacks off the time it actually was fake. New Zealand for the win. This is another iconic moment from the International Taste Test series, this one coming from International Desserts Taste Test. And throughout the whole episode, Link is losing pretty badly to Rhett. So on the last dish, Rhett believes it's from the Middle East, and Link also thinks it's from the Middle East as well. But if he just goes for the Middle East, and they're both correct, Link would still lose. So he's going to go for New Zealand instead. Rhett then tells Link that if the dish is from New Zealand, and he hits New Zealand, he'll give Link the win full stop. Link then confidently starts to aim, looks at the camera and says,
New Zealand for the win.
and then throws the dart and completely misses the board entirely. A classic Good Mythical Morning moment. Rhett and Link were conjoined twins at birth. This is the final theory from the infamous mythical conspiracy theories Good Mythical More. The theory goes that Rhett and Link were conjoined twins at birth and were attached at the butt, which is why they ended up getting tattoos of their wife's names on their butt, to hide the surgical scar. I don't think anyone actually ever believed this, so I think it was just kind of made up for the more. They had footage of a guy telling us the theory, but he kind of just looks like Josh, so I think they just had Josh record a bit so they could talk about it. Unless someone out there actually does believe it. I mean, it kind of does go back to the Chase thing, where he says the only way you can get a job at GMM is via nepotism, so. Tree Man. This is another Rhett alter ego who's only appeared twice. This is one where everyone acknowledges, though, that it's Rhett in a costume, so it's not like it's a whole new character in the canon or anything. Basically, it's just Rhett in a green morph suit wearing a Christmas tree mask, and he kind of hops around and talks about taking people in his branches. He's supposed to be a professional wrestler guy persona that Rhett won from the Most Ridiculous Wrestlers Ever game they played in the main episode. Many folks want this persona to make a comeback, but to my knowledge, they haven't used him since that episode. Good Mythical Morning is recorded at night. So, at this point, we all know that GMM is recorded in advance, but what if I told you it was also recorded at night? Why is it recorded at night? Just to mess with us mostly. Simply because it's called Good Mythical Morning, and it would be too easy to say it's actually recorded during the day. That's just what they want us to think. I think this actually comes from folks not knowing that Good Mythical Morning can be recorded in advance, or not thinking about that, so they just think it has to be recorded the night before so it can go live the next morning. Though I mean, they go outside a decent amount on Good Mythical Morning, and it isn't nighttime. Though I guess they could record the outside segments in the afternoons and the inside segments at night, but this is all getting very complicated. I guess I can't really 100% prove they aren't recorded at night, so if you really want to believe this, you can. Stevie stops calling Rhett and Link boys. This is another one that I enjoy, and it's a real recent one too as of scripting. On the International Dunkin' Donuts taste test from season 24, Rhett asks Stevie to stop referring to them as boys and start referring to them as men. So instead of okay boys, it would be okay men. And Stevie says she'll think of some new synonyms to call Rhett and Link. So starting the next time she would normally refer to Rhett and Link as boys, she begins calling them a new name each time. The nicknames range from her calling them fellas to Rizzlers to even calling them motherfuckers at one point. My favorite though is when she just calls them losers though. These are my favorite kinds of Rhett and Link jokes because they're very subtle and don't take up much time and very rarely get addressed. This is probably my favorite recent Good Mythical Morning gag. Merch cycles way too fast. A big criticism of the Good Mythical Morning merch that the community has is that it cycles out way too quickly, and some are only available for a couple days before being put in the vault forever. This is obviously a tactic to drive demand for the product, but some folks think it's pretty ridiculous. I really don't have much of an opinion on this since I don't buy GMM merch, but I do think that it incentivizes scalpers, and pair that with the very long shipping times most of the merch has, people may just bite the bullet and buy it from a scalper on eBay, rather than wait for the Mythical store to have it back on sale. Not really a huge community outcry, and I think most people just chalk it up to how YouTube merch generally works, but you'll find some complaints about it every now and again. Mishmash Mythical Cereal. This was a cereal created by Rhett, Link, and the whole Mythical Kitchen that was designed to be a sort of new take on cereal back in 2023. Now there were two flavors, the first one being a marshmallow macaroni thing called Sweet Mac and Mellow, and the second one being a French toast cinnamon toast crunch looking thing called Peanut Butter and Honey Sandwich. And you too, my lucky viewer, could get your hands on these beautiful flavors for the low price of just $39.99. shipping not included. Now, to be fair, that's the price for the variety pack, but that's just 4 very normally sized cereal boxes, so that comes up to about $10 a box, which is pretty clearly bonkers. These prices are justified by the duo based upon the fact that they are, quote, newcomers to the cereal scene and don't have that sort of inventory to make these cost any less money. Which, I mean, if that's the case, then just don't do it, but I guess I could understand if this was some amazing top of the line cereal or something. Hell, maybe I would even buy it just because the flavor sounded interesting, and I do love me some cereal. But sadly, this was definitely not the case. The cereal was mostly reviewed as extremely unimpressive at best and pretty dang awful at worst, the consensus of the worst of the two being the macaroni one. I believe they're still selling it since the website where you can buy it from is still up, but I really can't imagine much of anyone buying it nowadays. They did talk about it on the show a couple of times and played the back of the cereal box games on Amore once, but besides that, it definitely wasn't very heavily promoted, so I'm guessing these probably won't be out for very long, and you better get your hands on them while you still can, I guess. Josh and Emily Mythical Kitchen episodes are the best. Mythical Kitchen has been relatively controversial for a bit community-wise, but one thing the community does agree on is that Josh and Emily are the best duo on the show, and I would definitely have to agree. Josh and Emily have some great comedic chemistry, and both of them are probably some of my favorite newer crew members. They both have a very chaotic but still relaxed energy about them. It's almost like a brother and sister kind of thing. It's very, very fun. Nicole and Trevor Mythical Kitchen. Trevor and Nicole, on the other hand, are more controversial, especially after a Redditor came forward with their experience with them. Now, keep in mind, there is really no evidence to back this up, and all of this is coming from a random comment on Reddit, so I'm not taking this with a ton of credence. Basically, this person said that they were talking with Nicole and Trevor about how they could have made a dish taste better for Rhett and Link publicly on Instagram, but the two were very snarky and started insulting the commenter. The commenter then defended themselves, but Nicole and Trevor deleted all their comments, making it look like they were just obsessed with this random dish and weren't trying to defend themselves from Nicole and Trevor's rage. Reading this out in retrospect makes this all seem very, very suspect, because the commenter doesn't have any real proof, and even though Nicole and Trevor deleted their replies, they could have just linked the original post where this all happened at least, but everyone just seems to believe them, so it became kind of a controversy, and part of the reason why folks don't like Nicole and Trevor as much on Mythical Kitchen. Good Mythical Morning will never talk about Justin Bieber. This is a long-standing rule of Good Mythical Morning that was only brought up on the first episode. Good Mythical Morning will never talk about Justin Bieber unless he's a guest on the show. To my knowledge, I don't believe this rule was broken besides a few casual partial mentions, and Justin has never gone on the show, so we're still good. At the beginning, this was kind of one of those I hate Justin Bieber kind of things, because that was just the vibe at the time, but I think they've consciously avoided mentioning him again, just to keep the rule they started. Really the only rule of Good Mythical Morning, to be honest, and as Justin has started to fall off a little in relevance, I think it's fair to say that this rule will remain unbroken for the time being. The community is toxic. Definitely like any other internet community, the community is extremely whiny, angry, and generally pretty angsty about random things that matter very little when it comes to Good Mythical Morning. Even Rhett and Link have had to put out statements telling folks not to talk about the crew so harshly. Though everyone I've talked to while researching this has been pretty nice, so I'm sure it's one of those goofy vocal minority things, but scrolling through some of the posts and seeing what the community says honestly makes me embarrassed sometimes. It's like the Tom Ska rule of posting online, that no matter what you say about whoever, eventually the person you said the thing about will see that post. And thinking about some people seeing the things that some people in the Good Mythical Morning community say about them, even though I'm sure they're used to it, it makes me a bit red in the face, though I had nothing to do with what those weirdos say or do. I mean, it's not even like a surprise. Like I said, all online communities around this internet stuff is pretty toxic, but it has caused a few controversies over the years. Link's Time Machine. This was a strange running segment they did during Good Mythical Summer 2022. Basically, it's revealed that Link has a time machine and has been using it to subtly prevent mistakes throughout previous episodes. So stuff like taking a knife from himself during the restaurant ad versus Yelp review taste test, and causing a disturbance when he himself is about to say something bad about Mexico, causing him to lose his train of thought. He also goes forward in time too far at one point, accidentally causing him to appear in an episode that premieres 6 weeks later after the premiere of the episode where he was going forward in time happened, while he was demonstrating the time machine to Rhett. This culminated in Link using the time machine to go forward in the same episode to get the answer to the upcoming game that they were going to play, so he could beat Rhett, but he ends up just stealing the prize, a rotisserie chicken, instead, since Rhett won't tell him the answers. He still ends up losing the game, so he throws out the time machine, causing the time machine to malfunction, which he gives to Chase to throw out, causing Chase to have some time travel shenanigans happen to him behind the scenes. Chase is then canonically missing from Good Mythical Morning until he comes back during the International Peanut Butter Taste Test. Initially, Rhett and Link were just going to use Josh as the cartographer that episode, but when Chase comes back during that episode, they kick Josh out and bring Chase back in. There's more to it, but this is actually a pretty surprisingly complex subplot of the show, so that's all I'm going to go over here. If you want the full story, there are a couple of videos explaining it, or you could watch it go down yourself over Good Mythical Summer 2022 and Good Mythical Morning Season 20 and 21, I believe. Teddy Gentry Bass. So back in 2022, during the eco-friendly versus name brand taste test, Good Mythical Morning revealed that the black bass guitar that hung behind him was actually their friend Greg's, who gave it to them while he was living in Argentina. They had the guitar for over 10 years, and Greg finally got the gumption to ask for it back, and so Good Mythical Morning needed something to fill the space. So they asked the mythical beasts for something to fill the space, preferably a bass with something special about it. Then they float the at the time ludicrous idea of the bass being the bass guitar of guitarist Teddy Gentry from the band Alabama. It turns out his son, I guess, saw the clip and told his dad to send them the bass guitar because, and I quote, "These guys have more followers than you ever had." And then they ended up getting the bass guitar, which was signed by Teddy, and that was the thing they ended up putting up. The reason this is a controversy is because Good Mythical Morning asked for one from the mythical beasts, one that was personal to the person who actually watched and enjoyed Good Mythical Morning, and they ended up going with a guy who literally knew nothing about the show before his son said they had a lot of followers. I mean, I don't even think his son watched GMM, he just kind of knew they were popular, and just sent them a bass because he was famous, which kind of sucks. I guess they were just awestruck and thought that was really cool because the ludicrous idea Link floated actually came true, but it really wasn't anything that had anything to do with Good Mythical Morning or the community as it was supposed to be. Ted even wrote "to the mother beast" on the guitar, which no one really knows what that was supposed to mean, but they assume it was supposed to mean the set. This was something that was supposed to be like an intimate community thing, and it became some goofy product for some famous guy to be associated with more famous people, which was kind of lame, honestly. Personally, I kind of put the blame of this on Teddy for seeing something that was most definitely a community thing and then just being like, hey, I can use this to be a little more relevant, because it's not like Rhett and Link could have actually turned something down like that. Eddie's sword placement. This piggybacks off the last one a bit, but during the Teddy Gentry bass thing, Good Mythical Morning got another submission from a man named Eddie Bowman. This was a sword that his dad had gotten from a convention that he really enjoyed a lot and meant a lot to him, and after his father died in 2020, it was something that Eddie remembered him by, so there was some genuine sentiment in that item, and it obviously meant a lot to him. Something that would have been perfect for the show since, as he said, he started watching Good Mythical Morning in 2020 after his father died, and it helped him cope with his death. He also says it's full circle because his father was a jovial guy who loved to make people laugh, and Rhett and Link are both jovial guys who love to make people laugh as well. They were of course pretty nice to the guy, but the real crux is where they placed the sword that meant so much to Eddie, behind the chair couch thing barely visible during the show. The idea was for it to be an Excalibur kind of thing where it was stuck inside something and not able to be pulled out, but everyone was very disappointed that the bass guitar from the famous guy is in full view and in a place of prominence for the show, while the sword is, in all honesty, kind of tucked away in a corner, really unable to be seen. It seemed a bit like damage control since the Teddy thing caused a bit of controversy, and they didn't nearly seem as genuine with Eddie as they were with Teddy, so the placement was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Some people think this was a bit of a blown out of proportion thing that didn't really matter, but I actually kind of agree a bit with the outrage, though some of the hate was a bit too much in my opinion. Thankfully, they moved the sword a couple of times, and it's more easily seen in frame today, but there is kind of a bit of a Where's Waldo thing trying to find it, unlike that goofy bass guitar in full center view. Josh's traumatic backstory. This is going to be a little more touchy one since I don't really want to step on Josh's toes and seem like I'm making light of the stuff that happened to him growing up. He does kind of make jokes about it and he seems to be not too sensitive about it, but that could just be because it's coming from himself, meaning it's coming from a place that's comfortable for him, but I did want to mention it since it's a pretty known element of Josh, our mythical chef and mythical kitchen aficionado. If you want to get into the weeds and specifics, feel free to watch the episodes of Mythical Kitchen with Josh in them, specifically the school lunch episode, where Josh explains his upbringing as being a chaotic experience to say the least, of course in the context of the lunches he would bring to school every day. It's not all doom and gloom though, as Josh generally takes this in a positive direction to say that not all childhoods are happy and that's okay. So whenever he mentions that, he seems to say it in good spirits, which is great to see. Good Mythical Morning Studio Ghost. Alright, enough trauma, let's get into the real shit here. The Good Mythical Morning studio is haunted by a mysterious spirit by the name of Nartu Fodi. You may think this is a weird skit or guest thing or something, but no. Paranormal investigators have investigated and shown without a reasonable doubt that there is a spirit lurking within the halls of the mythical mother, or whatever Ted Gentry called it. It all started when a fan by the name of Ghost Hunter 1983 noticed some unexplained wispiness, as he called it, floating by Rhett's head on an episode of Good Mythical Morning. So they invited Eric Van Leer of the Valley Investigators of the Paranormal to come on the show and investigate. After some investigative tactics that proved that the ghost was listening, they tried a tactic for the ghost to respond that involved a hacked radio slowly shifting through the stations and listening in between the stations. This showed that the ghost was possibly a demon, though it could have been playing around, and the ghost was named Nartu Fodi, though when asked to confirm this, the ghost replies, "No sir." So it could have been playing around. It seems like this ghost is a real jokester, considering it doesn't like giving out any straight answers. In the midst of investigating though, the studio lights mysteriously shut off due to a blown power strip, and when Rhett is ending the episode and says Nartu Fodi, the lights flicker, so I think that pretty much confirms it. Fun fact though, if you want any concrete proof of Post Malone's Good Mythical Morning chops, he actually references this ghost in his Mythical Kitchen Last Meal episode, which is very fun. Link Stevie pregnancy comments. This comes from the More episode, What's the most popular cookie in each state? And Stevie mentions this bucket of ginger snaps that you can get from Trader Joe's. Rhett says he only ate ginger snaps at his mom's house, and then Rhett jokes about Stevie announcing that she's pregnant. This gets Link's wheels turning, and for some reason he wants to talk all about Stevie being pregnant, which Stevie is flustered by. It's all an extremely casual conversation, with Link saying that Stevie would be very cute pregnant, which Stevie dismisses and segues into more cookie state talk. They then play the game a bit for about 8 minutes, and then Link brings the topic back up, thinking that Stevie was flustered because she was assuming that Link meant get pregnant with a guy, I think, so he clarifies saying that there are plenty of ways to make a baby, and to separate making a baby from being pregnant. Link then goes on saying how Stevie could do something he could never do and how great it is that she can be pregnant. Rhett suggests that they discuss this at a different time since Stevie goes silent from being uncomfortable, but Link stands firm thinking he didn't do anything wrong, asking if that's a loaded question. There was some controversy around this, with the community thinking Link was way out of his line asking that sort of thing, but I'm a little bit on the fence. Sure, it would be weird if you think of their relationship as purely a business one where Link is Stevie's boss, but keep in mind they have literally known each other and worked for one another for 12 years, with Stevie being one of the first people to work at Good Mythical Morning. And it's not like they sell like insurance or something, they make internet videos, and Stevie has been in plenty of uncomfy situations for the sake of comedy throughout the years, so it wouldn't be inaccurate to describe their relationship as familiar. It seems like Link was trying to make her uncomfortable for the funsies of it, I guess, to an extent. Regardless, in a future More, Link apologized for making Stevie uncomfortable. It was probably one of those things where the community assumed that Stevie was more upset about it than she was, and so really just to quell the community, Link apologized, but I don't know any of them personally, so I'll never really know if anyone was actually upset about it. Regardless, it caused some controversy and fanned the flames of Link dislike for a bit. Another fun fact as well, the episode where Link apologized was also the episode where they put up Eddie's sword, so that couple of episodes was not a good time for Good Mythical Morning controversy-wise. Link murdered the Good Mythical Morning globe. Another small fun bit of lore, have you noticed the globe to the left of Rhett that's been in Good Mythical Morning for a long while? Well, apparently that globe is alive. Or at least it was before the International Carnival Food Taste Test episode. That was the point where the gender-neutral globe herb made themselves known and made comments throughout the episode, until Link stuck his hand inside their equator-split mouth and slowly choked the globe to death. The bit was it was very clearly Rhett controlling the globe using a pull ring, and not even masking his voice when voicing the globe. But yeah, now you know the globe is alive, and Link is not beating the psychopath allegations. Elijah Wood is stealing your socks. This was a video presented in the 2016 Good Mythical Morning episode Name That Stain, in response to a question from a fan asking where lost socks from the dryer are going. The video is of a pitched up Link going by the moniker Vigilant Black Rabbit, explaining the theory that the socks are being stolen by none other than Elijah Wood in a style akin to a 2015 YouTube conspiracy video. The video was then hosted on a channel called V1G1 bracket at NTB bracket at CKR at BB1T, which is a pretty cut and dry parody of the conspiracy YouTuber White Rabbit, with some The Vigilant Christian sprinkled in due to Link's pitched up voice. The symbol-laden channel name is also a parody of White Rabbit, whose official channel name is White Rabbit Official, with a 0 instead of an O. The guy's channel is removed now after the great YouTube conspiracy purge after the Pizzagate and QAnon stuff became mainstream, but his second channel where he reacted to the parody is still up, ironically called Black Rabbit Official with a 0, and it still has some 7-year-old videos up as well if you want to get a feel for the nutty stuff this guy made videos about. Anyway, Elijah Wood actually confirmed this theory on his Wired autocomplete interview, so be sure to set out your traps for him next time you're doing the laundry. Rhett and Link are part of the Illuminati. So this is going to cover a few different areas. The first being people like White Rabbit and other weird conspiracy YouTubers making exposed videos on Rhett and Link as Good Mythical Morning was starting to get popular. I was really big into the whole Illuminati stuff back in 2015 to 2016, and that was also the time I was really into Good Mythical Morning, so the algorithm would frequently show me videos exposing Rhett and Link as being part of the Illuminati, though I didn't believe them since I really liked Rhett and Link and I didn't think they were part of the Illuminati. I mean, come on. Sadly, I'm not going to be able to find any of these videos anymore because all big conspiracy YouTubers were wiped off the face of the earth after the purges of 2018 to 2020. Or I guess not really sadly, because the people making these videos were actively profiting off of spreading misinformation, but I can't say that I don't have some nostalgia for those. Anyway, the next area this covers is Rhett and Link meeting with President Obama at the time for their crazy YouTuber meeting, which was really just Obama telling them about registering for Obamacare and asking them to tell their fans about that. But it could have been one of those secret Illuminati crazy stuff, so who knows. Finally, and this is the biggest one in my opinion, is their video they did on the Illuminati, but specifically the more on this episode called Is Link in the Illuminati, where Rhett and Link have a surprisingly pretty candid conversation on their thoughts about the Illuminati. And even more surprisingly, Link seems to be more accepting of the conspiracies presented, saying things like,
But we didn't mean it. But that doesn't mean that they don't mean it.
and posting the true or false question of,
The most effective way for a celebrity to propagate anything is through a hand signal.
and then comes the kicker, when they start talking about this event that they were invited to, where they're at this weird TED Talk thing as Link describes it. And Rhett thinks Link is joking around for a second, but gets more serious once he knows what Link is talking about. And at this clandestine event, there would be all these crazy celebrities, including politicians and ex-President Bill Clinton for some reason, even though the person inviting them to the event clarified it wasn't a political event, but they did stress it wasn't to be talked about, and it was supposed to be a secret thing. Neither of them ended up going, but Link says he was intrigued. It was actually a really interesting conversation, and one of the most underrated mores in my opinion, and definitely blew my mind as a conspiracy-loving 17-year-old when it came out. In any case though, they did end up going to this weird event as I said, so even if that was the weird Illuminati meet and greet thing, they wouldn't have been involved, but I guess they could have gone and not told us, but then again, why would they even mention it in the first place if they didn't want to tell us that they actually did go? They probably aren't, and I don't even really believe the Illuminati is a real thing, but that conversation was pretty interesting is all I'll say.
No, it's to their advantage for people to accidentally do it.
Tier 6, Ascension. This is a moment you all have been waiting for, I'm sure. The part where we get into the real nutty stuff that most of the time isn't proven and most of the time is based off of a single random Reddit post that I found. I know that there's going to be some stuff that you don't know about because I literally knew about none of this besides I believe one, and that's going to be the one right after this, so get ready to have your mind ascended into greatness. Good Mythical Morning changes their thumbnails. Starting off, we have the fact that you would probably only know if you were researching it. Good Mythical Morning, as most big YouTuber folks do, perform A and B testing with their thumbnails, and even their titles to an extent. This basically means that they have two different thumbnails at the ready when uploading, and so the video will start off having a certain thumbnail, and depending on if traffic to that video is consistent with expectations or not, they will change the thumbnail to the second one at the ready, or the B thumbnail, as us very popular YouTubers call it. If that doesn't improve traffic, sometimes they'll go back to the first one, or they'll just stick with the one they have. It doesn't really matter, but this creates kind of a Mandela effect, where folks remember a video having specific thumbnail, but when they go check it, it's something different. It's not too crazy, but it's hard to tell unless you go looking for it. And there actually is a YouTube implementation in your videos that you can upload 3 different thumbnails, and then it'll automatically do A/B testing for you. So that's most likely what they end up doing. Link is secretly a Nazi. This comes from a Reddit post detailing Link's harsh way of pronouncing German slang and his propensity to accidentally hail the Fuhrer, if you know what I'm saying. Not too much of this. I obviously don't know what Link does in his free time, but I guess some think he's up to some Nazi shenanigans. This is more like the fun Nazis, by the way, like in Indiana Jones and whatever, not the weirdos who spend too much time on Twitter Nazis. No one's really accusing Link of being one of those. It's the fun Nazis. The crew secretly hates Link. Alright, right after his Nazi allegations, let's just get these anti-Link entries out of the way now. So, given that Link has caused more controversies generally for Good Mythical Morning, and has trouble not saying things that are controversial, some believe that the crew is just completely over Link in general. Like there's no warm feelings, no camaraderie, they just legitimately hate Link, and are just hanging by a thread hiding their true feelings. Just 2 off the top of my head who have a reason for hating Link are the 2 longest members of the Good Mythical Morning crew. Stevie for Link's pregnancy comments and making her uncomfortable, and Chase for trying to kill him with a dart twice. So I'm sure there's more going on in the mythical mother or whatever than what's shown on screen. There's also the episode Hidden Camera, Link is a Tyrant, that shows Link forcing Eddie to swallow some gross food in a Mythical More episode, Link using his subordinates as chairs, making Chase give him piggyback rides, etc. So does the crew secretly hate Link? No, probably not. And in the next entry, I'll tell you why. Everyone hates Link. Yeah, so for some reason, specifically the Reddit community really hates Link. Like just every single thing he does that's out of the ordinary causes someone to complain about him and how he's narcissistic and an awful boss and ooh hey, that's not a good look. It's pretty insane because no one really gets mad at Rhett. Now if you check the comments on videos, everything is hunky-dory really, and you won't see much Link hate, but in the community every couple of days you'll see a post about how Link is just completely selfish and unfunny and childish, yada yada. This is why the community, who I used in part to help make this iceberg, thinks that the crew secretly dislikes Link because they just hate him and can't fathom the crew, i.e. the people who see him upwards of 8 hours a day off camera, not hating him. Link to me is a guy who's really opened up in the past 4 or 5 years, and now he's not trying to constrain himself or present himself in a different way just because he'll be more likable to others. This culminates in him making some uncouth jokes at times and reacting more on impulse if he believes it will be funny. I'm certain that the crew around him knows this since they, are actually around Link and aren't just watching him on an internet show. The thing to keep in mind for this stuff is that there's a big difference between internet people and normal people. Not even as in like people who are on the internet a lot. I mean just people on the internet and people you see on the streets. I'm sure the folks posting the vile and mean things about Link are perfectly decent people the second they get off their computers and give people the benefit of the doubt and whatever, but when they're on their computer, they are not real people. They and the folks who agree and comment and thumbs up all the crazy stuff that they say, whatever, are not representative of any type of real human that actually exists. So, keep that in mind when you see this kind of stuff. The mystery merch box. Back in 2022, Mythical had the idea to sell a mystery merch box for $55. Basically a box that had 2 random apparel items and 1 random accessory item. The accessories could be pins, mugs, stickers, whatever, and the apparel items could be whatever apparel item completely at random. But the problem is, built into the fine print, the sizes for the apparel items are also completely random, which is honestly pretty bonkers, but it was clearly just like a clearance thing to get rid of old stock and trying to bank off the mystery box trendiness. Regardless, I don't think they've done that since, and they certainly aren't doing that now, but the controversy around this is pretty isolated. I've actually seen mostly positive things about the mystery merch box, so there were only those few issues that people brought up. Good Mythical Morning selling blindfolds. Have you ever wanted an iconic Rhett and Link blindfold? Well, you could have gotten one at one point, but they pretty quickly stopped being on sale 5 years ago. The controversy is that the blindfolds were actually sent in and made by a fan named Megan Wolf, and that the ones that they sold were obviously the exact same design. So did they steal this fan's work and just sell it? Well, I actually have no idea, because no one really talked about this, and they probably aren't going to address it, considering the only evidence I can find of this is, again, a single Reddit post. So, I mean, they probably did ask or give her a job or money or whatever, knowing them, but they didn't sell them for a very long time, so maybe that's why they stopped. I can't find anything on this Megan Wolf girl either, since Megan Wolf is a pretty popular name. She could be this Megan Malone girl I found in LinkedIn that works for Good Mythical Morning as a writer. Fun fact about these masks though, they were actually donated by Rhett and Link along with their original microphone and stand to the Smithsonian as part of their National Museum of American History, so I'm sure Megan Wolf isn't salty if she ever was, considering something she made is now at the Smithsonian. Josh purposefully makes food taste bad. This piggybacks off a previous entry in the last year, talking about the Nicole and Trevor Mythical Kitchen controversy thing. The reason that this anonymous commenter was commenting towards Nicole and Trevor in the first place was that they believe Josh could have made the food that they were making taste better. So the commenter then postulates that Josh was purposefully trying to make the food gross, so Rhett and Link would spit it out and throw up. This calls into question all that Josh has made that ended up being gross. The idea of the Willets in particular is to try the idea of a food combination, even if it's outlandish, and give it its fair shake, which is why Rhett and Link always try to swallow the food, even if it's completely awful. If Josh is purposely trying to make the food bad to get a reaction of Rhett and Link gagging, that kind of just destroys the whole purpose of the format. I mean, they might as well just be eating rocks or something if Josh purposely just makes the food bad, because it doesn't even matter in the first place if the only goal is just to get Rhett and Link to throw up. Thankfully, I don't take that commenter from that entry's word with very much credence, since they have no proof of anything, but if this were true, this would be a really big deal, and would call into question any food video Josh has ever done for Good Mythical Morning. If this were true, I'd really be in favor of outright just firing him, but I really don't think it is. Ear Biscuit's wife and lesbian joke. In an episode of Ear Biscuits with Link's dad, Charles, Rhett, Link, and Charles read off 2 jokes that had to be removed after the podcast had already been uploaded, I believe. The first one was, what's the difference between your job and your wife after 5 years? After 5 years, your job still sucks. And the second one was, what's the definition of confusion? 2 blind lesbians at a fish market. So yeah, they're definitely some real groaners. They actually had to explain the lesbian joke to Link's dad because he didn't get it, but yeah, they were goofy and very boomer tier jokes that they thought were funny, but the thing to keep in mind is that they're both in their 50s, so they're not going to have the same type of sensitivities generally as us weak little 20 to 30 year old zoomers and millennials. Generally, you don't think of them like that, since they are so in tune with the zeitgeist, but yeah, that stuff will come up from time to time, and I'm sure there'll be more stuff like this in the future when they become even more distant from the current general demographic. You definitely can't use that as evidence that they're sexist and homophobic as some folks do, since they didn't even make the joke and were just reading off submitted ones, as Link and Charles often do in their podcasts. But I can't say as to whether you can be offended or not, since I can't feel your feelings, so folks are valid if they felt like those were offensive and should have been cut, but in my opinion, this was probably nothing that needed to be addressed in a statement by them or anything. Like I said, many similar jokes, if not more offensive ones, have been told on Link and Charles' podcast without any outcries, so this really shouldn't cause too much surprise if you're familiar with that. Rhett has used a butt plug and Link is a masochist. Alright, this is hopefully the last time I will ever mention butt plugs on this channel, but yeah, September got a little crazy. I do kind of feel bad talking about this, all like, ooh, Rhett and Link are so weird, tee-hee, since I legitimately commend them for being so open on September, but this is a very crazy bit of lore that was uncovered as a result of them being so open with their sexual experiences. To be specific, what Rhett said was once his wife and him were together, they were very experimental sexually, and that it was funny because after going to his church and giving a talk on godly sexual wellness to teens and young adults, he would go home and do some anal play with his wife, which, to be fair, in my opinion, after you're married and you've been with this person, as long as the sexual experiments don't involve others, you're good with doing whatever kinky stuff you want consensually with your partner. And there are no problems with that religiously, but that's just my take. I just wanted to clarify that in case that tidbit got construed as him not taking his own advice. It was more of just a thing about the juxtaposition of the two. I really hope my mom and family have clicked off by this part, because we're going to continue on with Link's sexual masochism. Not too many specific examples mentioned in this department, but on Good Mythical Evening, Link mentioned enjoying a bit of pain in a sexual way. I can't find too many specifics, but I do remember him enjoying having the hot wax being poured on him in the Getting Waxed episode, so maybe it's stuff like that, or it could get into some crazier stuff. I don't know. I don't really want to spend too much time speculating on Link's sexual preferences, so we're just going to move on here. SS Sniper Wolf's privated episode. So in 2018, Good Mythical Morning did this weird thing where they would show you previews of the coming week's episodes that Sunday, and on March 11th, 2018, fans saw clips of episodes of the previews that featured the infamous SS Sniper Wolf, implying that they were going to have SS Sniper Wolf on as a guest star. This was a bit before she was super controversial, but she was generally disliked, and so the comments were very critical towards having her on the show. Mainly because she's a very generic TikTok reaction channel that does shooter gameplays sometimes, and definitely isn't like a personality-driven YouTuber. Whatever the case, Good Mythical Morning would not end up airing that episode due to the backlash. In retrospect, this ended up being a good thing, because a few years later, the Jax film stuff with her would come to a head, and she would come to his house threatening to fight him, so they probably would have had to private it anyway. Now here comes the fun part though. The only evidence of this episode existing is within this very strange video called SS Sniper Wolf This Week on GMM Crazy Reaction, which features a man in a gas mask silently reacting to only the SS Sniper Wolf moments of the This Week on GMM video showing her. This was uploaded on the day of, by the way, so at this point there wasn't any sort of controversy. Anyway, it just has him with the clips showing in the bottom left hand corner, and then after the clips are over, which is about a minute, it cuts to an experimental art metal performance for the rest of the video with no explanation. He doesn't do this for his other reaction videos, so I have no idea why he decided to do this for this one, but yeah, shout out to Reaction Faction, I guess. Charlie is 18. This is from the Match the Restaurant to the Movie Taste Test episode, and it's a comment from Link that some took as a bit off-putting. When he was the one who won the game, Rhett says he's able to kiss whoever his favorite celebrity is on the board. Link then mentions that Charlie D'Amelio is 18, so she would be a valid choice, to which the crew laughs, and Rhett says thanks for pointing that out. Then Stevie corrects Link, saying that she is not in fact 18 yet. Link rebukes this, saying that his research says that she would have been born on March 8th, 2004. Meaning as of the date of the video, August 5th, 2022, she would have just turned 18 a month ago. Rhett then says, but it's not going to happen anyway, and Link says that he keeps track of these things. But he says he's a much bigger fan of Bette Midler and gets the kiss from the cutout of her in the hit movie Hocus Pocus. Honestly, from my perspective, that was hilarious, and I didn't think it was weird. It seemed more like a goofy joke, and most agree with me, but the ones who don't, there could be some very disturbing implications with that. Like I said, I 100% thought it was really funny. Most people agree with me, but if you don't, you could see Link as being very suspicious, which is why I put it so low on here. If you think from my description it seems really weird, I would highly encourage you to watch the original video. Again, the Match of the Restaurant to the Movies Taste Test video, instead of just taking my butchering of the moment here, and see for yourself what you think. Miranda Sings outed herself. This one requires a little bit of background knowledge, but to sum up, Miranda Sings, or Colleen Ballinger, was found to have been messaging underage fans when she was at the height of her popularity. Typical YouTuber stuff of the week nowadays, but among the things she did was she sent a 13 to 14-year-old lingerie. That's about all you need to know for this, but this was exposed by the victim in 2020, and she sent this lingerie to the victim in 2016. While soon before that, in December of 2015, Colleen was on an episode of Good Mythical Morning, the Christmas Song Challenge, and in the More, Dreidel song remix with Miranda Sings, Link talks about how he wants to get underwear for Christmas, and then Colleen takes it to mean that he wants panties, as a joke, and starts making jokes about him wanting panties. She then extends the joke and tells everyone to send in their panties to Link. Was this a premonition of things to come? Maybe Nartu Fodi was trying to tell us something by persuading that line of dialogue supernaturally. Whatever the case, it definitely is interesting foreshadowing as to what would happen in the near future. Given how long it probably takes to send things out to Ireland, maybe she had already sent them out by the time the video was recorded, so possibly a Freudian slip mayhaps? We're obviously never going to know this, but this is a very interesting coincidence nonetheless. Ellie's Twitter breakdown. This one is in relation to Mythical crew member Ellie McElvain. In short, Ellie was a writer for Mythical Entertainment from 2016 to 2020, and many speculate that the reason she stopped being a writer for Mythical Entertainment was because of a very large series of tweets during 2020, mostly stuff about actor John Krasinski. All of these related tweets are deleted, so I can't find the primary sources of them, but from what I can gather, Ellie was really upset at John for portraying cops and FBI agents and whatnot on TV, mostly because now is the height of the BLM movement and the George Floyd stuff. He wasn't doing it like specifically then, he kind of was always typecast as those kind of characters, but I guess Ellie had some sort of dislike for him in particular. She also mentions that her family and friends were telling her to stop, in public tweets by the way and whatnot, but she was solely focused on, and I quote, abolishing police, tearing down the whole system, and of course, as always, canceling John Krasinski. There were also mentions by her of her PTSD, saying that these tweets were one of her many paranoid delusions, but I really cannot confirm what she's talking about with that. She also was kind of trying to use her following of Mythical Beasts to try and continue this cancellation, and this kind of got to be a big deal, and talked about on various news outlets where Ellie was, of course, always mentioned as Good Mythical Morning writer Ellie, so I'm sure Rhett and Link and the other Good Mythical Morning folks knew about this. John Krasinski is, of course, not cancelled, and is still getting work, so it seems Ellie's efforts were for naught, but she did get awarded with a large amount of unpaid time off by Mythical Entertainment in the form of a pink slip. No, I'm kidding. I have no idea why she stopped specifically working for them. Maybe she left on her own accord because she was clearly stressed out and was going through a lot of stuff, like a breakup and her grandfather dying, so maybe the COVID stuff and the George Floyd stuff was the straw that broke the camel's back. She is currently listed as a freelance writer and isn't associated with Mythical Entertainment at the moment, but they all seem to be on decent terms still, as she'll be mentioned and interacted with fondly by the rest of the crew. She's also on a podcast called What's Your Favorite Taylor Swift Song, if you're interested and want to hear from the horse's mouth. In any case, I believe that's the only real Twitter beefy thing that's happened with the Mythical crew, which is kind of surprising since they have so many internet people working for them, so they must run a pretty tight ship around the social media stuff around there. Good Mythical Morning number 666. For our final entry on this long iceberg, I'd like to discuss a corroborated but lost clip from the episode, Scariest Plants on Earth, which was the 666th episode of Good Mythical Morning. From the descriptions I've read, there was a hidden annotation on the video that when you clicked it, it sent you over to a video of 3 creepy looking hand puppets wearing black robes saying Illuminati over and over again in front of a black and white hypnotic background. Re-adding the annotations via a Chrome extension takes you to a video that is now privated, and there are no records of it even on the Wayback Machine, so it's likely gone for good unless someone made a reaction video of it wearing a gas mask or something. Some confuse this video with the Elijah Wood is stealing your socks video that I discussed earlier, but they're confirmed to not be the same thing. So yeah, ending on some creepy Good Mythical Morning lost media, since that is a staple of any good iceberg after all.
I've got one. Try this one on for scary size.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the Good Mythical Morning Iceberg. Definitely a long one, but I was glad I did it since there's a lot of craziness to this show that most people wouldn't expect, and hey, isn't that the point of an iceberg video in the first place? Let me know what you thought of this iceberg, and if there's anything I missed, please feel free to add some additional Good Mythical Morning lore that I didn't mention in the comments. I know that there were a few things, but I didn't really want to talk about characters and game formats the whole time, so I may do another one of these again sometime, given how well you all enjoy this. Probably on a completely different topic. I'm definitely done with talking about Good Mythical Morning for a little bit, but who knows, maybe after editing this, I'll hate the idea of ever making an iceberg video ever again. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and another special thanks to all of you who helped me with this iceberg. I feel like it came out great and will forever be the definitive iceberg for the series, at least until Link finally succeeds in killing Chase, and then we're going to have to redo the whole iceberg again. In any case, love you all, smooches, and I will see all you in the next video. Goodbye.
You know, this is it, Link. It's beginning.
Usually you say this is it when something is ending. So that kind of threw me right from the beginning. Because this is the beginning.
This is the beginning of something beautiful, hopefully something special in your life. You know, whenever I'm beginning something new.
And you're talking about this show, right? I just want to clarify.
Yeah, the show.
You're talking about the show.
Yeah.
That's,
What do you
okay.
think? Like our relationship?
I didn't know if you were about to blindside me with something.
You've been my best friend since 1984. I didn't think I had to define that.
This is it, Link. It's over. Our friendship is over. Yeah, I just...